Nepal launches quick fix plan for public services. High traffic officers given 30-day deadline for improvements. Nepali Congress planned general convention faces Supreme Court challenge. Dewa faction seeks to halt October convention. Nepal's poultry farmers take to streets over mounting losses. Protesters demand action against middlemen and illegal chicken imports. US widens economic sanctions on Iran. New sanctions hit aviation, shipping, gold and technology. World's oceans reach unprecedented heat levels. Record August temperatures raise fresh climate concerns. And Nepal begins ACC Premier Cup preparations in style. Defeat Malaysia by 9 wickets in warm-up match. Good evening, I'm Sarah Sapsana Marai and this is NTV World Prime Time News. We're coming to you live from Kathmandu at 1900 hours Nepal time. Elsewhere, it's 13:15 in London, 22:15 in Tokyo and just after midnight in Sydney. Now the news in detail. Nepal's government has launched a new action plan to make public services faster, simpler and transparent, also citizen-friendly. The Public Service Immediate Improvement Action Plan 2083 aims to reduce waiting times, costs, paperwork and unnecessary visits to government offices. Prime Minister's Office spokesperson Hemraj Aryal said the action plan aims to end unnecessary visits to government offices, provide clear information on required documents and procedures, reduce service delivery time and costs, and also expand the use of technology.
यो कार्ययोजनाले खास गरी नागरिकका समस्यालाई तत्कालै पहिचान गर्ने, विगतमा गरेका भनौं कमी कमजोरीहरूलाई चाहिँ त्यसको कारण पत्ता लगाउने र त्यसको आधारमा कुनै समस्याहरूको पहिचान गरेर भविष्यमा त्यस्ता खालका समस्याहरू आउन नदिनको लागि तत्काल समाधान गर्ने क्विक फिक्स भनेको विगतको लर्निङको आधारमा चाहिँ गर्ने विषय हो यो, ताकि नागरिकलाई सदा सर्वदा एकै प्रकृतिका समस्याहरू चाहिँ नदोहोरिरहन्।
Authorities have set a 30-day target for visible improvements in high traffic services, including passports, transport, land registration and district administration. A meeting of the National Assembly today unanimously endorsed a proposal to send the bill relating to the revival of previous provision under Nepal's Special Service Act 2042-1985 to the Legislation Management Committee for clause-by-clause deliberations. Earlier, the upper house of the Federal Parliament received the proposal from the House of Representatives along with its message. The upper house chairperson Naren Prasad Dahal put the proposal for decision. He later announced the proposal had been unanimously endorsed by the session. Minister for Law, Justice and Parliamentary Affairs Sobita Gautam, on behalf of Prime Minister Balendra Shah, tabled the proposal in the meeting. The upper house will next meet at 1:15 p.m. on 1st of September. Now, three newly appointed ministers in Nepal's Lumini province have taken the oath of office and secrecy. Health Minister Dipendra Kumar Pun, Minister for Economic Affairs and Planning Indrajit Tharu, and Minister for Agriculture, Land Management and Cooperatives Krishna Kushma Tharu took their oaths before Provincial Head Krishna Bahadur Ghartimagar in Botwal. The provincial cabinet was reshuffled on the recommendation of Chief Minister Chetnarayan Acharya under Article 168(9) of Nepal's constitution. The reshuffle also reassigned several existing ministers to portfolios including forests and tourism, social development, urban development, infrastructure and internal affairs. The new cabinet arrangement follows an agreement among the ruling parties with CPN-UML, Nepali Communist Party and Janata Samajwadi Party Nepal sharing ministerial positions. A petition has been filed at Nepal's Supreme Court seeking to halt the 15th General Convention of Nepali Congress scheduled for October. Former party President Sher Bahadur Dewa and former acting President Purna Bahadur Khadka have sought an order to suspend the convention process until a separate dispute over the party's legitimacy is resolved. According to Supreme Court spokesperson Arjun Prasad Koirala, a supplementary petition was filed by the Dewa faction. The case has been scheduled for a hearing on August 27. The Congress Election Committee has announced plans to hold the 15th General Convention in Kathmandu from 2nd of October to the 5th. The petition argues that the convention process should be suspended until the apex court settles its decision to allow a fresh hearing on the party's internal legitimacy dispute. We're going for a short break here. More news coming up. Do stay with us. You're watching NTV World and this is Primetime News. Welcome back. Nepal's Finance Minister Dr. Swarnim Wagle has pledged to remove regulatory hurdles facing the country's information technology sector, saying the government will take a flexible approach on issues including taxation and licensing. Speaking at a meeting with more than 24 technology startups on Tuesday, Wagle said information technology had emerged as an increasingly attractive area for investment, and that the government would encourage young entrepreneurs working in the sector.
हाम्रो सोचाइ चाहिँ अब यो टेक फिल्डलाई एकदमै अगाडि बढाउने हो र जसले राम्रो काम गरिराख्नु भएको छ उहाँलाई प्रोत्साहन दिने हो र यो काम गर्दै गर्दाको अप्ठ्याराहरू के के छ त्यसलाई पुराउँदै जाने हो र नयाँ सेक्टरहरुमा पनि पोजिसन गर्नु पर्यो अमेरिका चाइनाहरुले इन्डियाहरुले नै चाहिँ they are figuring out something in this area. Nepal पनि अलिकति जम्प स्टार्ट गरेर त्यो फ्रन्टियर पनि हालेर चाहिँ केही कुराहरुमा हामी अग्रस्थानमा जान सक्छौँ कि भन्ने.
The 24th General Conference, in fact, of the Asia-Pacific Institute for Broadcasting Development, AIBD, was held in Nepal, bringing together broadcasters and media representatives from 12 member countries. The conference reviewed 44 AIBD programs conducted between August 2025 and August 2026, involving more than 2,300 participants and covering artificial intelligence, journalism, digital content, cybersecurity, climate change, and information integrity. Addressing the conference, Nepal's Minister for Information and Communication, Dr. Bikram Timal Sinha, called on broadcasters to embrace technological advances while keeping public interest at the center and addressing the risks posed by artificial intelligence. AIBD Chief Executive Philomena Nana Prakasam thanked Nepal for hosting the summit and highlighted the growing impact of AI on the communications sector. The conference also emphasized trust, sustainability, and digital transformation in public service media. AIBD launched its strategic roadmap towards its Golden Jubilee in 2027, with celebrations planned in South Korea. Poultry farmers in Nepal have taken to the streets protesting low farm gate prices, middlemen, and the illegal import of chicken and poultry products from India. They say rising production costs, poor quality chicks, and weak market prices are leaving them unable to recover their investment. The farmers have gathered in Kathmandu demanding government action to protect domestic producers and remove middlemen from the poultry supply chain. Sabika Shrestha with Pramila Bhandari and Anil Thakar bring more.
Poultry farmers involved in raising chickens and eggs have stopped feeding their birds and taken to the streets in federal capital Kathmandu since Monday. Frustrated by the problem of their domestic production failing to fetch fair prices because of illegally smuggling of live chickens as well frozen chicken meat from India, the farmers have hit the streets. The farmers have gathered at Maitighar in Kathmandu to voice their grievances to the government for last 2 days. They complain of the hatcheries themselves selling poor quality chicks, resulting in abnormal mortality, weak growth, higher feed consumption and reduced production.
एकदम धेरै लसमा छ अहिले 250 हुने ठाउँमा 220 मा पनि हामीलाई चल्ला बिकाउन गाह्रो भइरहेछ हामी किसानलाई यो कारणले गर्दा पनि आज हामी यो माइती मण्डलमा आउन बाध्य भएका पनि छौं.
Although the cost of chicks, feed, medicines, labor, electricity, water, poultry house management, interest, transportation and production risks have all increased, farmers say they are suffering losses. They say though the corresponding selling price for their chickens in butcheries is much higher compared to what they get. On the other hand, poultry entrepreneurs say that consumers are being forced to pay higher prices because of middlemen.
यो हातमा यो चल्ला यो तपाईले देख्नु भयो भने चल्ला हो तर यो चल्ला हैन यो ठुलो क्रोचमा भइसक्यो हामीले कसलाई चिक्स भन्छौं हेर्दाखेरि चिक्स छ तर यो क्रोरमा भइसक्यो यो 24 दिनको भइसक्यो है तर नर्मली 24 दिनको कुखुराको न्यूनतम तौल चाहिँ 1 केजी हुनुपर्छ आज हेर्नु मेरो हातमा 200 ग्राम पनि छैन त्यसलाई मैले 80 रुपैयाँ हालेर किनेको है 80 रुपैयाँ हालेर आज 24 दिन हुँदै गर्दाखेरि यसले दाना पनि खाइसक्यो मेरो ब्रुडिङ कस्ट पनि खाइसक्यो हेक्लेर भने चाहिँ घाटाको आज यसलाई दाना दिने कम्पनी आज हामीलाई चल्ला बेच्ने कम्पनी औषधि दिने त घाटामा छैन नि त घाटामा भनेको को हामी किसानै छौं.
The farmers have also drawn the government's attention to their demands, warning that the Nepali poultry sector will face an even deeper crisis if the same situation persists. The chickens produced domestically by farmers who make large investments cannot be sold as long as illegally imported products occupy the market. They have one clear demand: remove middlemen from poultry farms and provide relief to farmers. Sabika Shrestha, NTV World.
Accident insurance has been provided to 1,227 journalists across Nepal's Koshi province with around 1 million rupees in support from the Provincial Ministry of Internal Affairs and Law. The program, organized by the Federation of Nepali Journalists, Koshi province, aims to provide financial protection to journalists in case of accidents. The insurance has been implemented through the National Insurance Company. Inaugurating the program, Chief Minister Hikmat Kumar Karki urged journalists to practice fearless, impartial and independent journalism, saying the government must create a safe environment for the press. He added the provincial government would continue supporting the rights and interests of journalists. Minister for Internal Affairs and Law, Gombu Sherpa, said strengthening journalism was essential to strengthening the state and democratic institutions. FNJ Koshi Province President Bharat Kharga handed over the insurance policies to representatives of district branches. Moving on, the streets of Charikot, the district headquarters of Dolakha in eastern Nepal, have come alive with colorful Lakhe dance, a traditional Newar festival performed after Gate Mangal. The dance depicts the mythological battle between Krishna and Lakhe, who is believed to represent the demoness Putana. The performance continues through Krishna Janmashtami, ending with Krishna defeating Lakhe with his Sudarshan Chakra. For Charikot's Newar community, the festival is more than a spectacle. It is a living link to a heritage preserved across generations. Hundreds of people gather in the town's market areas, particularly Sato Batu Chowk, to watch the max dancers and celebrate Charikot's distinctive cultural identity. International news coming up next. For now, a short breather. Iran has said it is confident it can counter widened U.S. sanctions after Washington announced what it described as an economic D-Day against the country to try to isolate it from the global economy. Iran's economy minister said Tehran was fully prepared for the sanctions, which he said would lead to another defeat for the U.S. The U.S. on Monday imposed massive new economic sanctions against Iran, expanding restrictions to 5 additional sectors in an effort to increase pressure on and further isolate the country. The sanctions are now extended to Iran's aviation, digital assets, gold shipping and technology sectors. It also said that the U.S. would suspend multiple general licenses related to Iran, covering certain educational activities and services, personal remittances and sports and academic exchanges. The latest measures represent a significant escalation in U.S. pressure on Tehran, as President Donald Trump's administration continues to pursue what it describes as a policy of maximum economic pressure. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has said Washington is stepping up economic pressure on Iran, warning that those helping Tehran move and launder money will be cut off from the U.S. dollar system. Bessent says the campaign is aimed at further weakening Iran's economy nearly 6 months into a war that has reached a stalemate.
Teams from Treasury, State, and the U.S. military are now meeting with their global counterparts to tell them that the United States expects action. Every country has a defined timeline to shut down activities we have identified. If they do not take action, we will do so unilaterally through Treasury authorities. For example, every branch of Bank Melay must be shuttered and dark. And let me be clear, any entity that facilitates money laundering on behalf of Iran will be removed from the U.S. dollar system. The clock just started ticking.
Meanwhile, China says it would safeguard its interests after Washington outlined plans aimed at the economic asphyxiation of Iran, a key economic partner of Beijing. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian said China-Iran cooperation had always been conducted within the framework of international law and should not be interfered with or disrupted.
经济战极限施压无助于解决问题，只会进一步激化矛盾冲突，造成风险外溢，扰乱全球的经济金融秩序，损害他国正当权益。当务之急是推动局势降温，尽快回归对话谈判轨道。中方将采取一切必要措施，坚定维护自身权益。
India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar met Russian President Vladimir Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Moscow as New Delhi and Moscow discussed bilateral ties, the Ukraine conflict, regional developments and global challenges. In his meet with Putin, Jaishankar briefed him on the latest session of the India-Russia Intergovernmental Commission on Trade, Economic, Scientific, Technological and cultural cooperation. He said economic ties between the two countries had expanded significantly. During talks with Lavrov, Jaishankar reviewed cooperation across a range of areas, including trade, technology and other bilateral priorities, as well as regional and multilateral issues. Putin credited Prime Minister Narendra Modi with helping strengthen the India-Russia partnership and said he hoped to meet him soon. A deadly overnight gang raid in Kenskoff, a hillside community overlooking Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince, has killed 47 people and injured 22 others, according to local authorities. The attack is the latest in a series of violent raids that have struck the area since last year, forcing thousands of residents to flee their homes. The renewed violence has triggered anger among residents and called for Haiti's police chief to step down, with communities accusing authorities of failing to provide adequate protection. The attack underscores the worsening security crisis in Haiti, where heavily armed gangs continue to expand their influence and challenge the government's ability to protect civilians. More international news and sports update coming up next. For now, a short break. The average global sea surface temperature has reached its highest level on record, a European Union agency has said, warning that a rapidly intensifying El Nino and human-caused climate change were putting unprecedented strain on the world's oceans. In a statement on Monday, the EU's Copernicus Climate Change Service said sea surface temperatures hit 21.1 degrees Celsius on Friday and Saturday, surpassing the previous record of 21.09 degrees Celsius set in March 2024. Copernicus called the timing of the new record particularly notable. It said global ocean temperatures usually peak in March and April when the summer in the southern hemisphere, which is mostly ocean, draws to a close. But this year the record was set in August. The World Meteorological Organization too said it expects El Nino to strengthen in the coming months. And Copernicus said its seasonal forecasting system indicates that the event could reach levels not seen for several decades. As global ocean temperatures remain at historically high levels, Malaysia's worsening haze linked to fires in neighboring Indonesia is adding to growing concerns over the wider effects of climate change. Nearly 30 areas across Malaysia recorded unhealthy air quality, highlighting how regional wildfires can quickly threaten public health and spread pollution across borders. Under Malaysia's Haze Action Plan, outdoor activities must be suspended when the air pollutant index exceeds 100, while schools, kindergartens and nurseries are required to close when readings surpass 200. Scientists say rising temperatures and increasingly dry conditions are attributing to the wildfire risks in many parts of the world. Thousands of Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh's sprawling camps protested on Tuesday over deteriorating living conditions, marking 9 years since a brutal military crackdown in neighboring Myanmar forced hundreds of thousands to flee. More than 1.2 million Rohingya refugees now live in around 30 overcrowded camps in Bangladesh's Cox's Bazar, the world's largest refugee settlements. Refugees called for greater international attention to their plight and demanded safe and dignified conditions, while stressing that they want to return to Myanmar only when their security and rights can be guaranteed. The camps continue to face severe pressures, including limited access to food, healthcare, education and employment, while aid agencies have warned of growing humanitarian needs. Now, holds of spiny lobsters are being landed at a port in Goto City, Nagasaki Prefecture in southwestern Japan after the local specialties fishing season opened last Friday. To protect the species, the city bans fishing during its spawning season from May 20 through August 20. A boat offloaded the lobsters at a port on the city's Fukuejima Island around dawn on Sunday. Fishermen use a tool called tekagi to remove the lobsters from nets carefully to prevent their antennae and legs from being damaged. They said the season is going well and expressed optimism that strong catches will continue in the weeks ahead. The catch is mostly shipped to markets in western Japan. And with that, we move on to sports update. Nepal defeated host Malaysia by 9 wickets in the practice match of the ACC Premier Cup at Selangor Turf Ground today. Chasing a revised target of 228 runs in 48 overs after rain interrupted the match, Nepal reached the target in just 28 overs, losing 1 wicket. Opener Asif Sheikh top scored with 161 runs off 85 balls. Arjun Kumar remained unbeaten on 61. Earlier, Malaysia were bowled out for 232 runs in 48.2 overs. Captain Sandeep Lamichhane took 4 wickets while Karan Casey claimed 2. The match was part of Nepal's preparation for the ACC Premier Cup beginning in Malaysia on August 30. Nepal will play Bahrain in its opening match on 31st of August. Moving on, around 2,500 athletes from 64 countries took part in the 38th Bosphorus cross-continental swimming race in Istanbul, Turkey, swimming from Asia to Europe across the iconic street. The 6.5-kilometer race challenged competitors with strong currents and waves as they made the crossing from the Asian shore to the European side. Last year's champions successfully defended their titles. Dokugan Ulach won the men's race in 52 minutes and 3 seconds, while Su Inai claimed the women's title in 54 minutes and 54 seconds. The annual event has become a major fixture on Istanbul's sporting calendar, offering athletes a rare chance to compete between two continents in a single race. And before wrapping up, here's a quick reminder of our top stories this hour. Nepal launches quick fix plan for public services. High traffic officers given 30-day deadline for improvements. Nepali Congress planned general convention faces Supreme Court challenge. Dewa faction seeks to halt October convention. Nepal's poultry farmers take to streets over mounting losses. Protesters demand action against middlemen and illegal chicken imports. U.S. widens economic sanctions on Iran. New sanctions hit aviation, shipping, gold and technology. World's oceans reach unprecedented heat levels. Record August temperatures raise fresh climate concerns. And Nepal begins ACC Premier Cup preparations in style. Defeat Malaysia by 9 wickets in warm-up match. That's it for this edition of Prime Time News. Our next bulletin will be at 2200 hours Nepal time. Do join us through our social media and also get the latest update from our official website, nepaltelevision.com. I'm Sarah Sapsanamarai. Thanks for staying with us. Have a wonderful evening ahead.
Welcome to the studios of NTV World in Kathmandu. Public Service Broadcasting PSB Nepal's new initiative to make Nepal more visible and audible to the global audience. Welcome on board.
This is NTV World, facts that speak, insights that matter.
Telling the stories of a changing planet. NTV World, Nepal's perspective to the world.
Exploring the heartbeat of Nepali creativity. This is NTV World.
The power of story shaped by technology. NTV World.
Unearthing Nepal's hidden heritage. Discovering the timeless Nepal.
Telling stories that endure across centuries, where culture breathes, stories bloom.
When the world moves, we make a sense of it.
NTV World. Taste of Nepal. Every recipe, every flavor tells the story.
Journalism in the digital age. Fast, focused, verified.
Stories hold power. Stories reflecting life. Stories of the hinterlands. Reporting for NTV World.
This is NTV World. Welcome to News Hour.
This is NTV World. Welcome to Primetime News.
one story at a time.
Crossing borders, connecting voices, where Nepal meets the world in dialogue. This is NTV World, Nepal's perspective to the world.
Voices that connect Nepal to the world, bringing perspective, region and relevance to every story. NTV World, Nepal's perspective to the world.
Stand by. Mic is on.
3, 2, 1, cue.
We are NTV World.
Buddha-Nilkantha is one of Nepal's most sacred and historic pilgrimage sites. Located at the southern base of Shivapuri Hill, just north of the Kathmandu Valley, this temple complex has long served as a peaceful place where devotees come to seek faith and spiritual connection. At its center lies the extraordinary statue of Lord Vishnu, known here as Jal Narayan. This massive stone figure, half submerged in a sacred pond, shows Vishnu reclining on the coils of Sheshnag, the king of serpents. Resting on the cosmic ocean, this form represents divine balance and protection, making Buddha-Nilkantha one of the most revered Vishnu shrines in Nepal.
यहाँ विशेष गरी हाम्रो वैशाख महिनाभरि मेला लाग्ने गर्दछ। त्यसमा पनि वैशाख 1 गतेलाई विशेष रूपले मानिन्छ र वर्षमा 5 चोटी वैशाख 1 गते भगवानलाई विशेष गरगहनाहरूले सजाइन्छ, पूजापाठ विशेष पूजाहरू हुन्छ, महास्नानहरू आदि हुन्छन्। त्यस्तै गरी वैशाख 1 गते, वैशाख पूर्णिमा अनि कार्तिक शुक्ल द्वादशी र कार्तिक पूर्णिमामा विशेष मेला लाग्दछ र यस ठाउँको पर्व अनुसारको विभिन्न समयमा एकादशीमा, शनिबार, बुधबार, बिहीबार त्यस्ता विशेष पर्वहरूमा ठुलो घुइँचो भिड लाग्ने परम्पराहरू चल्दै आएका छन्।
Two major festivals, Hari Sayani Ekadashi in Asar and Hari Bodhini Ekadashi in Kartik, are celebrated with great devotion. Ekadashi, observed on the 11th day of each lunar fortnight, is a sacred fasting day dedicated to Lord Vishnu. It is believed to purify the mind and body and deepen spiritual discipline. During these festivals, the temple becomes lively with worship, fasting rituals, chanting, and the lighting of oil lamps. Even on regular days, hundreds of people visit to pray, meditate, and experience the calm environment of the temple. The history of Buddha-Nilkantha is believed to date back to the Lichavi period, showing the artistic and cultural depth of ancient Nepal. The 5-meter-long black stone idol lies gracefully on the serpent bed, holding the conch, chakra, mace, and lotus, symbols of protection, cosmic order, and divinity. According to legend, a farmer and his wife discovered the statue while plowing their field. Their plow struck stone, and the idol is said to have bled. Shocked, the villagers gathered and uncovered the figure with their hands. Afraid they had committed a sin, the farmer's apartment apologized to the god for disturbing the idol. Stories say that Lord Vishnu then appeared before the people as Narayan in forms similar to those worshipped in Badrinath and Kedarnath. This is believed to be the origin of the name Nilakantha.
किसानले हाम्रो खलोमा जहाँ खन्यौं त्यहीबाट रगत आइरहेको छ भन्ने कुराहरु चाहिँ फैलिए अनि गाउँका किसानहरु जो खेतमा काम गरिरहेका थिए ती सबै जम्मा भएर हातको माध्यमले खन्दै जाँदाखेरि यो भगवानको दिव्यमान विग्रह प्राकट्य भयो। प्राकट्य भइसकेपछि तिनी किसानलाई बडा चिन्ता भयो, चिन्तित भए। मैले त ठूलो अपराध गरेछु, भगवान यहाँ हुनुहुँदो रहेछ मलाई थाहा थिएन र भगवानसँग एकदम अनुनय विनय गर्न थाले, रुन कराउन लागे। साक्षात हेर्दाखेरि भगवान चाहिँ सामान्य रूपमा सामान्य दृष्टिले हेर्दाखेरि नारायणको रूपमा देखिनुहुन्छ, तर भगवान चाहिँ बद्रीनाथ र केदारनाथजीको स्वरूपमा आउनु भएको अनि त्यसलाई चाहिँ पूर्णता दिनको लागि नाम चाहिँ उनको नाम नीलकण्ठ थियो। त्यही भएर भगवानले तिम्रो नाम र मेरो नाम प्रसिद्धि गर भनेपछि नीलकण्ठ भनेर चाहिँ नाम रहने भयो।
Although open to the sky, the temple is an important example of traditional Nepali architecture, simple, symmetrical and symbolic. The area also serves as a gurukul, offering teachings in Sanskrit, Vedas and classical forms of worship. Surrounding the temple are peepal trees, valued for their religious, cultural, and environmental importance. They provide shade and a sense of calm to the space. At the northern entrance are the idols of Three Dev and Three Devi, Shiva, Saraswati and Ganesh. They symbolize power, knowledge and auspicious beginnings. At the center stands a statue of Hanuman, representing strength, devotion, and loyalty. Every morning from 7:30 to 8:30 a.m., priests perform the daily ritual, bathing the statue, offering fresh clothes, flowers, incense, and holy water. The sounds of conch shells, bells, and chanting create a devotional atmosphere.
I have deep faith in Buddha Nilkantha, which is why I come here often. Every visit brings me a sense of peace and comfort.
Budhanilkantha is also connected to nature. The green forest of Shivapuri rises just above the temple, adding to its peaceful surroundings.
यो क्षेत्र चाहिँ वास्तवमा अब यो भगवान विष्णुको चाहिँ एउटा आस्थाको केन्द्रबिन्दु.
This place is a center of devotion for all followers of Lord Vishnu. Most people come here with the belief that their prayers will be heard and their wishes fulfilled.
For many visitors, the temple acts as an entry point to both spiritual and natural beauty, attracting pilgrims from Nepal and abroad. Today, Budhanilkantha stands not only as a religious site but also as a cultural heritage treasure. The government, local communities and devotees continue to work together to protect and preserve it for future generations. At every bend of the serpentine Bheri River, a new face of nature emerges. Each turn revealing a beauty so varied and mesmerizing that it moves the heart moment by moment. Traveling from Chinchu of Surkhet through Jare and Mehelkuna toward Gorbakot, the Bheri displays its quiet miracles. Over its crystal blue flow drifts the rustle and chirping of dozens of birds. The whisper of nearby trees merges with the vast blue sky, reflecting a harmony of natural splendor. Cutting through Chinchu, heading along the proud and scenic terrain of Gorbakot, our thoughts find themselves racing steadily along the Madan Bhandari highway toward Lake Besi in Surkhet. Our destination, the Raute settlement. We seek to observe closely the lifestyle of this indigenous group, long perceived as distant. We hope to feel a sense of closeness with a community rarely encountered, where the Raute, in their most authentic form, stand before us to share their stories. The Raute have cultivated a unique identity as Nepal's nomadic ethnic group. If someone in their settlement dies, they immediately abandon that location and do not return for 10 years, a tradition that makes permanent settlement extremely challenging. The temporary homes are built by fixing wooden stakes into the ground, tying cross pieces, and covering the structure with old cloth and tarpaulin.
सधैँभरि यो पुर्खा मेरो पुर्खौली त्यस्तो छ त्यस्तो नभइदिए भए एक ठाउँमा बस्ने थियो एक ठाउँमा नभए यो हजुरलाई हल्दुवार यो घर बनाउँछौँ त्यस्तो घर हामी मन पर्दैन मेरो मन पर्दैन यही यस्तै चिरपाल तागा कोडाउनु हुन्छ हामीले यस्तै मन पराउँछ यही गाडो लगाएर राम्रो मान्छौँ अब पहिला हेर्न जानु पर्यो पहिला
त्यो हेर्न तपाई आफै
यो हामी आफू त जाँदैन केटाउरु जान्छ त केटाउरु गएर फेरि हेरेर ठाउँ राम्रो छ कि नराम्रो छ कि भनेर ठाउँ यो जहाँ ठाउँ राम्रो भयो त्यही जाने यस्तै पाखामा को बस्न सक्छ र यस्तै समूह जग्गा चाहियो.
Especially during winter, protecting themselves from the cold becomes difficult. They sleep on the bare ground with only thin tarpaulins, not enough clothing to cover their bodies fully. Men wear a loincloth and wrap their backs with coarse cloth, knotted in front and falling to the thighs, with a cap or a small turban on their heads. Women wear a short, patterned skirt of rough fabric and a handmade blouse that covers only part of the torso and chest. Women adorn themselves with earrings, necklaces and bracelets made of iron, brass and aluminum. When we visited in late Kartik, the cold had already set in, yet the Rauti sat on the ground as usual. Even when ill, they rely solely on their chieftain, traditional healing practices and herbal remedies. The Rauti tell that the community consists of 3 clans, Katyal, Raskoti and Samalvanshi Shahi. According to the National Census of 2021, Rauti population stands at 566. It was 618 in the 2011 census.
बात यो कोही मान्छे यो पहिला त आया थिएन अब आजभोलि त यो चामल पनि आउँछ भट्टा पनि लाग्यो हो कि होइन चामल पनि आउँछ यो तिरपाल पनि आउँछ ब्ल्याङ्केट आउँछ खाना पुग्यो त भइयो अब भोकै मरेको छैन के अरे बाहिरबाट आयो भने कामधाडी त गर्नु पर्यो हो कि होइन त्यो काम कुसी बनाउनु पर्यो मधुस बनाउनु पर्यो खाद बनाउनु पर्छ अब दरार जुगु हामी बनाउँदैन हजुर.
Traditionally, the Rauti have lived in the forests, ravines and riverbanks of districts like Dailek, Jajurkot, Surkhet, Acham, Salyan, Dang and Kalikot. They dwell in the wilderness, hunt monkeys and carve wooden utensils which they exchange for grain in nearby villages. It's a cycle that sustains their livelihood. The Rauti have distinct marriage customs. After marriage, a separate area is set aside for the couple. According to Rauti belief, a widow should not remarry after her husband's death. Marriages occur strictly within their own community between Rauti youths. Apart from cooking pots at home, an axe for cutting trees, and a chisel-like tool for shaping wood, the Rauti do not store belongings. Men prefer to hunt monkeys using traps, while women gather wild roots and tubers. With just an axe and chisel, they craft wooden utensils. Once, the Rauti believed touching money would bring misfortune. They also avoided speaking with outsiders. But today, they readily ask anyone for money, an indicator of the slow transformation in their lifestyle and consumption habits.
मेरो नाम फुलमाया.
कति वर्षको भयो?
म 18 भयो.
अनि स्कुल जाँदैन?
स्कुल त जान थियो पहिला त जान दिएन. आज भोलि पनि स्कुल जान दिन्न.
कसले?
मुखियाले.
किन नि?
मुखियाले नि परन्दाले खाना दिन्न त
किन किन होला त त्यस्तो
खै के पो होला नि मुखेले दिन्न नि परन्दा जानु त मन त लाग्छ तर परन्दा दिन्न.
In recent years, increasing dependence on alcohol has begun to create serious health issues within the community.
कहिले न कहिले यो यहाँ जंगलमा बस्ने बजार हेर्न जाने बरु चिस्टोडा आडा माइने मान्छेमा कसैले बजारको नासाइ हुन्छ त्यो नास हेर्न जाने कसैले यो मौसुक लाग्छ चिस्टो मौसुक यो जंगलबाट मौसुक हेरे पनि झन् आउन मान्छे यो मेरो परिवर्तन नगर्ने मान्छे परिवर्तन गरेको कहिले पनि राम्रो भन्दैन हामी मेरो पुर्खैबाट यो परिवर्तन नगरेको मान्छे परिवर्तन गरेको न यो पैसा चाहिँ आँखाले पैसा चिनेटा भइहाल्यो.
Nepal's constitution not only recognizes the equal existence, rights and dignity of all ethnic groups, but also ensures fair protection, upliftment, empowerment and development of marginalized and endangered communities. The state has pledged equal distribution of economic, social and cultural opportunities with special provisions for the protection and advancement of disadvantaged people within minority groups. Although the federal and provincial governments have introduced various programs for the Raute community in recent years, the lives of the Raute have yet to see the meaningful improvement envisioned.
Pokhara is undoubtedly #1 destination for tourists in Nepal. The valley, blessed with natural beauty, attracts domestic and foreign tourists alike. You must have already visited Pokhara. If you haven't or planning another trip, then these are some of the must-go places in Pokhara. The first attraction in Pokhara is the Feva Lake. Boating in Feva Lake is a ritual for every tourist visiting this paradise. The Tal Barahi temple at the center of the lake adds to the beauty of the place. A round-trip boat ride in Feva Lake to and from the temple is a feature of both the lake as well as the temple. Separate boat ride, watching the reflection of Mount Machapuchri on the lake and fishing spice up the Feva experience. The lakeside along the banks of the Feva Lake is a popular tourist hub. Many tourists in Pokhara choose Devi's Fall as their second destination in Pokhara. The water from Feva Lake exits towards Seti River through the Gupteshwar cave from this Devi's Fall. The mighty water stream rushing deep down into the gorge, covered by water vapor, is a magical sight. Pokhara is known as the city of lakes and caves. Many of the lakes and caves have religious importance. This is Gupteshwar cave at Chorepatan area. Inside the cave, the idol of Lord Shiva is a well-known pilgrimage. Further inside the cave, one can see the Devi's Fall. Mahendra Cave is another famous place in Pokhara, and nearby is another well-known Chamere cave. Both the caves can be visited together. Two other well-known tourist destinations in Pokhara are Begnas and Rupa lakes. Fresh fish or Begnas lake is a sought-after delicacy. Rupa lake is just round the corner beyond a small hill towards the eastern edge of Begnas lake. Away from the hustle and bustle of the town, Begnas and Rupa lakes cannot be taken out of a tourist's itinerary. This is the famous white monastery on top of the hill above Feva Lake. This is also a popular destination for domestic as well as foreign tourists. The top-angle bird's eye view of Pokhara city from the monastery is a sight to behold. The placid Feva Lake, the tall mountain range, and the birds like paragliding pilots on the background of Sarankot Hill are mesmerizing. The Bindabasini temple in Pokhara is a famous shrine in Nepal. The best route to visit the temple is on the way to Sarankot. Devotees throng the Bindabasini temple, which is atop a small hill with panoramic view of Pokhara city. The Bindabasini temple is famous among the Hindus across the country. Sarankot is a hill station on top of a hill on the northwestern side of Pokhara. A must-go place to see the majestic Mount Machapuchre and Mount Dhaulagiri in the Annapurna range in front of the eyes, and also the Pokhara and Leknath cities on the other side. Sarankot is synonymous to paragliding in Nepal. Taking off from the Sarankot hill, one can enjoy the panoramic mountain range in addition to the bird's eye view of Pokhara city. Ultralight and zip flyer offer a thrill to adventure seekers in Pokhara and are becoming major interests for tourists. Other places including Swarak in Sangja have the potential to be world's best place for paragliding. First time in Nepal, Paragliding Accuracy World Cup was held at this place, situated at Mahapur of Virkot municipality of the district. The place drew global attention after the event. Pokhara, famous tourism destination of the country. Majority of locals engaged in tourism industry. The city of lakes and caves, hub of aviation sports. Some major destinations: Lakeside, Feva Lake and Tal Barahi Temple, Begnas and Rupa Lakes, Mahendra Gufa.
The world we inhabit today seems increasingly difficult to describe through the vocabulary of the post-Cold War era. The assumptions of globalization are being questioned. Great power rivalry has, in a way, returned. Wars and conflicts are reshaping geopolitical calculations. Economic interdependence itself has become an arena of strategic competition. And perhaps most significantly, the liberal international order, which for decades appeared to be the organizing principle of global politics, is facing challenges both from outside and from within. Welcome to Geopod. I am Shivani Thapa-Bosnell. Our guest today has given this emerging reality a rather striking name, the Wolf World. Mark Sachs is a geopolitical expert and strategic analyst with 2 decades of experience working in Asia. And his new book, for which he is in Kathmandu, examines the great power competition, geoeconomic disruption, and illiberal revolt that he sees as defining this new era. Mark, welcome to Geopod.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let us begin with your book. Your title immediately provokes curiosity. Why the Wolf World?
Well, I'm actually citing Thomas Hobbes. He was writing his famous book in the 17th century during Europe was actually in war. You had the 30s war raging on the continent, and there was a civil war in England raging. So he famously said, when order collapses and the law of the jungle rules, man is another man's wolf. And I find that striking, the parallel to our day today, because I believe that the world that we have known over the last 30 years, what you call Pax Americana, what you call the unipolar moment, what you may call the liberal international order, is eroding or has collapsed to a certain degree. That is not opinion, that is research fact. If you look at what the Peace Institute of Oslo has researched, you see that in 2025, they collected more violent conflict and interstate war than at any time since World War II. So we do see an escalation of violence. We do see an intensification of geopolitical rivalry, great power rivalry, and that is changing how the world is constituted. Great powers are disobeying, sometimes ridiculing international law, and that creates this kind of rule-less disorder, this anarchical state that I call the wolf world.
And what has fundamentally changed from the world that we thought we were living in after the end of the Cold War?
There's been some structural changes that we could observe for some time, but have not been front-page news yet. Over the last, let's say, 20 years, maybe if you want to date 2008, the global financial crisis, you could observe that there is the re-emergence of great powers, of course China, India, but also Russia. And at the same time, you see some crisis happening in the West. So you see a slow relative decline of the United States and the West vis-a-vis the rest of the world. So that means that this historical anomaly, which we call the unipolar world, when the United States was so powerful, there was the only global power that can actually create the rules for the rest of the world, has come to an end. And if we fast forward now to 2026, we see that geopolitics have created a chessboard where US hegemony is simultaneously challenged in 3 primary theaters: in Europe by Russia, in the Middle East by Iran, and in East Asia by China. And that means that the US military doctrine, which was actually until last year the official doctrine, that the US must be able to fight and win 2 simultaneous wars in 2 theaters, has become obsolete. Quite to the contrary, we see that in order to prevail over Iran, the US now needs to pull out its navy from the South China Sea. It needs to pull out some of its missile defense from the Korean Peninsula. So that means, number one, the United States is militarily overstretched. Yesterday we heard numbers coming out that they're pushing 40 trillion US dollars in debt, actually United States, as the issuer of the world reserve currency, has lost its AAA rating. And number 3, we see a domestic revolt sometimes under the banner of MAGA, but it's actually even a progressive thing against what they call the forever wars. So that means we have like a military, fiscal, and domestic political constraints on US power, and that actually is changing how global politics is being played. Enter the Trump administration, which has now, as the liberal hegemon, declared the order the United States founded and defended for 80 years obsolete.
Is the wolf world simply a more dangerous world or simply a fundamentally different international system?
It is fundamentally a different system because the distribution of power has shifted from a unipolar concentration around the United States towards something that I call asymmetrical multipolarity. The world today, and let's say the world in 2050, is going to look like this. You do have two superpowers, that is China and the United States, that are in a league of their own, but maybe not as overpowering as the US and the Soviet Union were at the height of the Cold War. And then you have the emerging of a lot of rising powers in the global south, Brazil and Turkey, Indonesia and Iran, you name them, right? Which are sometimes more consequential on the ground. As you see in the war in Ukraine, as you see in the war in the Persian Gulf, actually a lot of the action is determined by regional powers. However, they do lack global reach. They are not rule makers on a global level, they are regional powers. And in between you have three what I call continental-sized question marks. That is India, Russia, and the European Union. They have the size, the scope, the population, the technology, the economy to become poles, but they have a lot of internal divisions and question marks that we will have to see if they actually develop into a pole or actually disintegrate. And that is taken together an asymmetrical multipolar world, and it will be very difficult for any power, both for the US as well as for China, to completely dominate that.
If you could walk us through the central argument of your book.
We are seeing a twin crisis of liberalism. What we just discussed is that because there is these structural shifts in the global distribution of power, has led to a crack up of the American-led international order and has led the American government to declare the liberal elements of that world order obsolete. So that's your global level. And this has repercussions on the national level, on liberal hegemony within our liberal democracies. You can maybe say that the liberal heavens have collapsed. You know, Fukuyama 30 years ago talked about the end of history, and the assumption was that sooner or later every society on the planet will develop a regime which is called liberal democracy. I think no one believes that today anymore. In fact, we see the exact opposite. We see an authoritarian wave raging around the planet. So that means this expectation, this utopian horizon that we all develop towards liberal democracy has been shattered. And this emboldens authoritarian actors on the ground. They believe the world policeman is no longer there. So some of the escalations of conflicts that I talked earlier is because there's simply the cost for going to war with your neighbor or cracking down on your population seems to be lower. But also it emboldens and actually triggers what I call an illiberal counter-revolt within Western liberal democracies. So if you look to countries, obviously Trump, MAGA is part of that, but you could see that what happened in Poland and Hungary. You can see the far right in Britain and in France and in Germany. So wherever you look, you have these illiberal revolts against the liberal establishment, and I believe that there is a mutual reinforcing cycle because these illiberal forces are putting the axe to the liberal elements at home, but also on the global level.
Now, geopolitics has almost become a very fashionable word these days. It's everywhere, from academics to podcasts, television studios, and even policy discussions. But there is a rather uncomfortable question here. Geopolitics, or simply discussions around it, does not put food on the table. So what does great power competition mean to the ordinary people?
Well, let's take it home to Nepal maybe, and I may disagree slightly that it does not put food on the table. I think it is at the end of the day very much about the food on the table. If the big question is, of course, now the great powers are having their rivalries, and there's lots of geopolitical conflict going on. And I would say the natural reflex, and I think this is also a commendable policy choice by a lot of smaller and middle powers, to say, this is none of our business, we want to stay out of this, we are not going to choose sides, and we're going to hedge and balance in order to try to have as much room for maneuver as we possibly can. I very much agree with that. On paper, that is the right choice. But coming back to your question, where it becomes uncomfortable is actually how much room for maneuver do you actually have? Because as long as we had an American-led liberal order, the critical things that you need in order to survive and prosper, you could buy on the world market. The wolf world does no longer work through a global market. So if you want to have access to critical top technology, the Americans just put into place a policy called Pax Silica. So they're saying, if you want to have our top technology from AI to quantum computing to semiconductors, you have to play on our team. And the Chinese are saying the same thing. So you basically have to choose at some point between two incompatible technology worlds. The same goes for critical minerals and rare earth. You cannot just buy them on the global market anymore. You have to have good relationships, either with China or with an alternative provider, which is aligned with the US. This can happen to fossil fuel. That's what we're seeing in the Persian Gulf. Are you with Iran or are you with the other side? So that actually determines your access to oil and gas. This could happen, of course, also to infrastructure investment. Are you going with the BRI or are you going with the alternative? So what I'm describing here is very much food on the table, is that because these choices are being put on you, and this is actually a very interesting quote by the former Prime Minister of Singapore. He said, none of us want to choose a side, but the structural trends that I just mentioned may force us to do so against our best interest. So that means your policy room is shrinking, your space is shrinking, and it has a lot to do with the food on the table.
You argue that the liberal world order did not simply collapse because of its external rivals became stronger, right? It also suffered from the internal erosions.
Right.
What, in your assessment, Mark, were the fundamental failures of the liberal order that brought us to this point?
Well, if you look at, let's say, the Western liberal democratic countries, there is a huge frustration on large parts of the working and middle classes over how the last 30 years have turned out for them. You could say that the globalization, neoliberal policy, automation, offshoring, these kind of things have actually hollowed out and weakened the working and middle classes in Western countries, right? So today you have this huge frustration. And if you talk to a common man on the street, I mean, next time you take a taxi driver in London or in some small town in Germany, they will basically tell you three things. Number one, we know things will get worse for us. Number two, we have a suspicion that we're not being told the entire truth about the problems that we have. And number three, we believe that we are going to pay the price for it. And this is not only welfare cuts, this is the lives of our sons in trench of some war. That is what I call the populist moment. This is the mood. And later, illiberal forces come and play on that mood. Right? So the illiberal counter-revolution is actually finding fertile ground. But the fertile ground has been created by the failure of a lot of the policies of the liberal establishment in the neoliberal age.
Now, was the problem therefore that liberalism failed, or that the way liberalism was practiced became increasingly disconnected from reality?
I do not have any issue, and I think no one really has, with the liberal philosophy, checks and balances, rule of law. I think that's all good and fine. I think the problem was more or less the neoliberal policies over the last 30 years that have actually offshored large parts of the industrial base to other countries, that have intervened in a lot of countries militarily almost non-stop in the case of the United States, that have deregulated the financial markets, which led to an enormous crisis. The printing of the money is now basically inflating the real estate, so no one can afford to buy a house or pay the rent anymore, and so on and so on and so on. These were deliberate policies. Some of them are still in place. Some of them are changing dramatically now, but some of them are still in place. And that is actually where the frustration comes from.
Are we witnessing a crisis of liberalism here? Or a crisis of the very intellectual foundations on which the Western order was built?
I think it's fundamentally true to say that the West has been preaching water and been drinking wine. Right? There's been double standards by the application of international law, and today people are saying that seemingly a life in Ukraine seems to be more worth than a life in Gaza. Right? So there is a deep frustration in the global South over Western double standards, and in some other countries, maybe more non-democratic in nature, there is a suspicion that all of this talk about human rights and humanitarian intervention is in fact a fig leaf for some geopolitical intervention into their internal affairs, all the way to regime change. Right? So that is the accusation, and I think the accusation is not entirely wrong. But now we have to come back to the question, do the universal norms and values, such as human rights, such as the rule of law, international law, which actually have been developed in Enlightenment age, still have value for us in the wolf world of tomorrow? And this is maybe the only time where I speak as a German. I believe that the lessons that we have learned from 2 world wars and the genocide that we call the Holocaust today is that a merely positive world, positivist legal world where you can might makes right, is extremely vulnerable to arbitrary, whatever the dictator says goes. So usually millions of people die. So my question is, are we actually throwing the baby out with the bathwater? Yes, the frustration over universal norms is real, but that does not mean that the idea of common rules of the game is a bad idea. So what I do propose is a compromise that has a very interesting historical precedent. When we had this Cold War between the East and the West. In 1975, the East and the West came together in Helsinki and agreed on what was back then called the Helsinki Accord. And it means that everyone agreed, and that meant the East, that universalism, that the universal norms of international law and human rights are valid. And everyone agreed, and that meant the West, not to intervene to enforce them. That was actually the formula which was at the root of détente, right? It meant universality without intervention, universalism without interference. And I believe that this is something that could work today as well, because in reality, this is not a very ideological struggle that we see today. It is about critical minerals and trade and tariffs. It's very material. So there is not a big ideological gap between the great powers of 2026. So I think they could maybe agree on this, but it actually opens up a question that we may also want to talk about. It means that we have to look into an order that is negotiated between the West and the non-West.
But can such a settlement really happen when the parties, do not necessarily share the same understanding of sovereignty, intervention, legitimacy, or even what constitutes a legitimate international order?
For me, it seems quite unlikely that a single power will emerge that is as powerful so it can dictate the rules for the rest of the world. So we're not in, let's say, at the cusp of the next empire, right? Which leaves us in a very uncomfortable situation that sometimes it can just be a disorder, anarchy, war, right? So I think there's a very strong case that there needs to be some rules of the games, there needs to be some governance mechanisms that actually allow us to tackle global challenges from climate change, but also prevent war, right? And if there's no victor that can impose, it needs to be negotiated. And this is the first time since 600, 700 years that non-Western powers will be absolute primary players on the negotiation table. And here becomes now a very interesting philosophical question, because the concepts of order that has developed against the historical experiences of people, against the philosophical traditions of civilizations, are very different when we look into that part of the world where China is today, that part of the world where we're right now, the Muslim world and the Western world, right? So what I try to do in the book is to see, okay, what are these concepts of order, and how far away are they from each other, because at some point we need to find a compromise between them.
Right. So is the real conflict therefore not simply over power then, but over ideas about what legitimate power should look like?
That is certainly part of it, because that is the very definition of an order. It's basically a superstructure that governs, raw power, and I think this is a good thing, because especially for smaller countries like Nepal, international norms are some sort of a shield against the arbitrariness and coercion of great powers, right? So I think we all share, and smaller and middle powers like Germany share a strong interest in upholding and safeguarding some sort of order, right? On the other hand, I would not overplay the values stuff, because then we are very quickly into what Huntington called the clash of civilizations. This is not a conflict over culture. This is a conflict over material interests and power, right? Which is good news, because the latter is much easier to be negotiated, because if you go into values and identity, that is usually existential and essentialist, and that actually very difficult to resolve. So in that sense, it's good news that today it's only interests, only material things where compromise is easier to be reached.
And can there be a genuinely universal order when, different civilizations have very, very different historical experiences and philosophical traditions?
If you look at the way that the multilateral institutions, let's take the United Nations Security Council, for instance, reflects the balance of power of 1945. So if you are not part of that in 2026, then your question is, why would I adhere to that kind of order? So the answer from the Global South is rules okay, governance bodies okay, but it needs to be reformed in order to reflect the increased weight of the Global South today. And that is a very interesting challenge for where I'm from. Because, frankly speaking, I do not believe that the United States is going to step aside. So the Europeans will have to step aside in order to give greater representation and voting rights for the Global South, right? So it's a very interesting challenge for policymakers, because we as Europeans have an existentialist interest in order. Why is that? Because the European Union has been constructed out of treaties. So it's a miniature rule-based order. And it's entirely unclear if a miniature rule-based order can survive in the wolf world. So for the Europeans, our existential long-term interest is to safeguard the multilateral order, but that means the cost is that we may have to downsize our influence today. That is something that is very difficult for policymakers to do, but that's a challenge that we see.
Could the future therefore be less about one universal model and more about negotiating coexistence between different models?
Very much so. I mean, at the table, on the table right now, we have three propositions for the future order. One of them we may call neo-imperial, right? That is, of course, what some of the great powers are discussing, to say, okay, we have some great power pole, and they have a sphere of influence, and they can more or less do whatever they want. They mutually accept their sphere of influence, and all the other smaller ones have to bandwagon with them or try to wiggle through these spheres of influence. Obviously, I'm not a fan of that, right? If you ask smaller countries, I'm sure that would be Nepal's position, is to say, no, let's go back to the basics. Let's go to the Westphalian order, which was founded very much at the same time that Hobbes was writing, which is to say all the states are the same, have the same rights, and sovereignty, non-interference, and territorial integrity is the organizing principles of the international system. Sounds good on paper. I'm not sure they have the power to actually enforce that. And also, I'm not sure if you can really tackle these kind of global challenges like climate change with 200 states around the table, right? Has a lot of collective action problems. So I believe that you need some sort of governance system. It may not be all of it that has been created after 1990 in a unipolar moment, but I believe we should have an interest to safeguard as much as we can. So what I'm advocating for is a post-hegemonic or post-American, multipolar and post-liberal order that would save the essence of the United Nations and actually makes it work for the 21st century.
Mm-hmm. You describe the emerging system as an asymmetrical multipolar order, a world where power is distributed, among several actors, but very unevenly, like you just mentioned. Now, if no single power can impose a new order, Mark, does that make negotiation inevitable, or does it simply make the world, harder to govern?
Well, first of all, it makes it harder to govern. That's very much what we're experiencing today. So can we have coalitions of the willing, of middle powers, and actually get something done? Personally, I have three maybe disclaimers where I think maybe the concept could be improved. First, no one wants to be a middle power. It's like the bigger ones don't want to be a middle power, the smaller ones, we're not sure if they are. Second, and I've been 20 years in Asia, don't call it coalition. Anything that sounds like alliance is a no. There's no takers, right? And number three, if we look into the issues, you're going to have smaller countries on the table. Some smaller countries have special skills that are needed in a coalition like this. So I call it partnerships in the middle. And I think this will be the most fascinating and also the most urgent task for international strategists to test what kind of formula can be used in order to make them work.
So does this mean are we even heading towards multipolarity, or merely towards, several competing spheres of influence?
Well, the sphere of influence proposal is certainly on the table. If Trump goes to Beijing and mentions G2, right, what he did in May, if you listen to the Russian concept of the near abroad, so these are kind of the proposals that are actually spheres of influence. But then again, this is very contested. Russia seems to be unable to beat Ukraine. The Americans seem to be unable to beat Iran. So great powers seem to be unable to actually create those spheres of influence that they talk about. So I would not say that this is a foregone conclusion, but I'm saying that attempts are there. Actually, we can observe them being made to create this, right? But I think it has to do a lot with the asymmetrical multipolarity. If the great powers would really be so powerful as they believe what they are, they could create this, right? But seemingly they're not, right? So that means power is distributed a little bit more evenly. Unfortunately, not entirely evenly. So there are still concentrations of power. So I don't think, because, in this part of the world, I know a lot of people have high hopes on multipolarity because they say this will democratize the international system. I'm a little bit more skeptical when it comes to that. I don't think that we see 200 countries rising. A few are rising, and if they're always so benign is another question, right? But I think multipolarity, asymmetrical multipolarity is real. This is what we see if we observe the balance of power and even the balance of power in war right now. And I think that makes it difficult to create these spheres of influence.
How do you see Asian geopolitics today? And perhaps more importantly, how do you think Asia is changing global geopolitics rather than simply responding to it?
Well, there's two things. One of them is structurally, because of great power rivalry. I said there's three primary theaters of geopolitical contestation: Europe, the Middle East, and East Asia. Europe and Middle East have hot wars. East Asia is relatively calm. There may be a reason for that, and I very much hope it is, because this is also speculation only. Of course, if you look at the geopolitical map of Asia, you see that China feels encircled by the US, right? By the US alliance system, but very clearly over what you call the first and second island chain, which is a lot of islands with military installations from the US, which actually could at some point cut off the supply chains of China and the Strait of Malacca. So what China has been trying to do over the last decade is to break out of this perceived encirclement westward, that's your Belt and Road Initiative, in order to bypass the Strait of Malacca and keep access to the European market and the energy supplies of the Middle East. And eastward, by trying to push out the US and its allies of the South China Sea and break into the strategic depth of the Pacific. And that means, if you flip the script of what Beijing believes to be defensive, and you look at from the perspective of the US or maybe Japan and South Korea, the Philippines and Australia, they perceive the same thing as aggressive, right? They see like a military peer pushing through the island chains into the Pacific the first time since Pearl Harbor. And that has been basically the flashpoint of geopolitics for a couple of years. I would say luckily, military planners have run war games both in Beijing as well as in Washington and come to the conclusion that a direct military confrontation between the US and China cannot be fought or won at acceptable cost, which is a nicer word for saying this may go nuclear, right? And that means that we have a very similar logic of mutually assured destruction that we had in the Cold War, what prevented the Cold War from going hot between the US and the Soviet Union over Europe. And then you basically have two takeaways from that. Number one, if the struggle between the US and China is not fought by military, it is fought on the fields of economics and tech. This is why Asia is actually the hotbed of geoeconomics, not so much geopolitics, right? And the second thing is that you have basically two options if you are not the US and China. Either you can double down on your alliance. This is what Japan and South Korea are doing, and Australia. But it's also what Cambodia and Laos are doing with China. Or you can try to hedge and balance and try not to choose sides, which is what pretty much all the rest of Asia is trying to do. And then we come back to the conversation we had earlier. Can you? How much room for maneuver do you actually really have?
Has the global center of gravity already shifted towards Asia?
Absolutely, and that's been a while already. I mean, if you look at all the numbers, you look at population, you look at GDP, you look at technology, the geoeconomic center of power has definitely shifted to East Asia, I would say. And geopolitics increasingly also, it's a bit more complicated because we have the other theaters and we have, of course, the US, which is still the most powerful country on earth, right? But let's say the geoeconomic center of gravity is today in East Asia.
China is challenging American primacy. India, on the other hand, is pursuing strategic autonomy and multi-alignment. Japan is reconsidering its security posture. And the Indo-Pacific has become one of the defining strategic concepts of our time. Is Asia moving towards greater strategic autonomy? Or is it becoming the principal arena in which American and Chinese power will collide?
Very difficult to say if both the concept of Indo-Pacific and Asia actually survive. Indo-Pacific was a very fashionable term over the last couple of years, which had to do with the American geostrategy to use India as a counterbalance to China. I think if you look at the recent fallout over tariffs between New Delhi and Washington, that idea may not actually become true, and then the Americans just gave up the term, right? They renamed part of their military structure. So the Indo-Pacific for the Americans have become obsolete. And if you look at Europe, which also was doubling down on this idea of the Indo-Pacific, like every European country, and the EU had Indo-Pacific strategies, Europe is in a very vulnerable situation right now. And we stay in Asia, but just to this one point, Europe will have to concentrate its forces on reconstructing the European economies and actually increase its territorial defense if the United States retreats for a little bit, right? So that means Europe does not have enough resources to project power into the Indo-Pacific, or I think the Indo-Pacific strategies of Europe are also obsolete. So that means no one actually is talking about the Indo-Pacific anymore. And if you call it Asia again, that is also not a coherent thing. You know, Asia has different regions. South Asia is different from East Asia. I think it's more interesting to look at it through these flashpoints, through these arenas, through these theaters of geopolitical confrontation. And that is in East Asia alongside the island chains. It starts on the north from Japan and the Korean Peninsula and then goes to the Strait of Malacca around Singapore. That is where the two actually superpowers geostrategically, maybe not clash in a hot sense, but this is where they bounce off each other at the moment, which is very good news for you, because that means South Asia is sitting outside a primary theater of confrontation. That's not a theoretical thing. That has very important consequences. Geopolitical competition is global. It's in the Arctic, it's in Africa, it's in the Pacific. That is not the argument here. And conflict is also global. You see wars popping up everywhere. In your region, we just had a small war, border clashes between India and Pakistan. The difference, if you are in a primary theater of geopolitical confrontation, means that the interests of the great powers are touched upon so much that they get involved, and therefore a regional conflict escalates. A local conflict escalates to become a regional one. So if there is a civil war in Syria, it's different from a civil war in Myanmar. If there is a border war between Cambodia and Thailand, which is outside the primary theater, is very different from a border war in Europe or in the Middle East. So I would say it's a blessing not to be in a primary theater of geopolitical confrontation.
And where does India fit into this emerging Asian order?
Well, India is certainly, as I mentioned before, an aspiring great power. It is an aspiring pole in the multipolar order. It certainly has a size and scope. I mean, it's the most populous country on the planet. It will soon be the third biggest economy on the planet. It has its own technological industries. So India is certainly aspiring to become a great power. I would say that there is still a lot of internal contradictions which have to do with the development of the country. But also I think that the really interesting question is, can you actually become a global leader if you're not a benign hegemon in your own region, right? And it seems to me, if you observe, and we're now in a neighboring country of India and I go around the region a lot, that there's still a lot of, let's say, conflicts that have to do with the role of India in the neighborhood. And I think that is something that New Delhi has to figure out. Can it aspire to become a global leader if it's not a benign hegemon in its own South Asian region?
Let me bring this conversation home to Nepal. Nepal sits between two major powers, India and China, while having to maintain important relationships with United States, Europe, and the wider world community. At the same time, it has its own domestic dynamics to check and maintain, especially with its own domestic political and economic dynamics increasingly influencing how foreign policy is conducted here. Now, in this wolf world, Mark, where strategic, economic, and technological dependencies are becoming increasingly intertwined, what options does a country like Nepal really have?
Well, there's a saying in geopolitics, which I do not agree 100%, but it's still interesting, and it's say geography is destiny, right? So you cannot change the fact that you are a landlocked country between two giants, that it will always be your geography. But what you can try to do is basically find more room for maneuver. And I think there may be three things that we can look into. Number one, if you look at another smaller landlocked country, Mongolia, they are situated between Russia and China. They have a long-running policy, what they call third neighbor policy. So they know that they are, locked between Russia and China, but they also want to have improved relationships with Japan, with the US, with the European Union, in order to have more options. Second, we are going into this question that we had before, hedging and balancing, right? And that means, I think the best option for a smaller country is to keep its option open. The problem with aligning is that the partner that you choose is going to take you for granted, sometimes like a marriage, right? And the other side is going to shut you up, right? So that is actually, from the country that has chosen a side, not a very beneficial situation. So keeping your options open may be a good thing, but keeping in mind the conversation we had earlier, that in a lot of the questions, your room for maneuver, your policy space is actually much smaller. The third thing is something that I observe in other countries, and you have to tell me if that is something that is true or not true in Nepal, because I don't understand your domestic politics enough. But if there is, a democracy always means that everyone disagrees, that's completely normal. But if a country has, let's say, a minimal basic consensus around its foreign policy posture, it is much more difficult for external powers to exploit internal conflicts, right? If you are divided, you are becoming a pawn, and different factions will be played each other by foreign powers, right? I'm not saying that in a democracy, everyone has to agree on everything. That is a delusion, right? But let's say an overall idea: what is the place and the role of Nepal in this greater picture? If there's a consensus, I think it will keep foreign powers much more at bay.
Is strategic autonomy still realistic for a small state?
I think it's not, to be honest. I think it's underestimating the vulnerabilities, and it has a lot to do with what I said earlier. If we look into the hard issues, like think about COVID, right? Were you be able to actually procure vaccines, and from where? It was not available on the global market, right? And what I'm saying is that this will be the normal case in the wolf world. A lot of the things, from tech to critical minerals, from technology to weapons, so many things, you cannot just go to the global market and buy anymore, right? So that means some sort of partnership, some sort of relationship, some sort of alignment will have to happen in order for you to procure what you need to be a functioning country, right? And that means your space for autonomy is actually much smaller than a lot of countries what they think.
For countries like Nepal, how long can hedging remain viable if the great powers increasingly demand strategic choices?
They are demanding strategic choices. The one that is right now being demanded is what I call Pax Silica. It's like choose our technology world or the other technology world. And I think this will increasingly go on like this in many more sectors, the geoeconomics pressure. And it will be much, much more difficult if a major war breaks out. I mean, that's the main takeaway from Europe, but also what now, let's say, the Gulf countries have learned in the new war in the Middle East, right? You may want to keep your options open, you want to hedge and balance, you want to try to have good relationships with both sides. But the second a major war breaks out, your room, your space for maneuver shrinks dramatically, and the pressure to align with one side will mount up. So what I said before, luckily for you, it doesn't look that way, that there is a major war around the corner in your region. So that's good. So I would say, from a Nepalese perspective, watch the geoeconomics.
What should Nepal absolutely avoid doing?
Whoever doesn't understand how the wolf world works can get hurt. Right, so I think and I think that's what you said in the beginning. If we use the vocabulary of a time that is over, if we use the logic of a time that has passed, actually you can get hurt. And I think understanding, the rules of the game, the chessboard of the wolf world, is very essential in order not to get hurt.
And what is that one opportunity Nepal should not miss in this emerging order?
Well, I think you can position yourself as an electricity superpower in the region. I think one of the takeaways from the crisis in the Persian Gulf is that, of course, every country on the planet has now realized how vulnerable it makes you if you're only dependent on fossil fuel. And I think China has shown the advantages of having renewable energies as well as a fleet of vehicles that is run by electricity. That is certainly a technological revolution that is ongoing, and both for that but also for data centers, electricity will be the resource, right? So it seems that Nepal seems to be well suited to produce that.
Mark, you ultimately argue that neither a return to Western liberal universalism nor a world divided into rigid civilizational blocks is likely to provide stability. Instead, you propose a negotiated middle ground, combining power balancing with a thinner but functional institutional architecture, right? So if that is the future, what would this new world order actually look like?
I think it would look a lot like the United Nations in the Cold War. Of course, looking back, that was not an ideal situation. You had great power rivalry, you had proxy wars, you had ideological confrontation, and that meant that the United Nations was also paralyzed. Certainly the Security Council was paralyzed for 40 years. Not an ideal world. And yet, we eradicated smallpox. We have banned the gases that destroy the ozone layer. We have somewhat mitigated nuclear proliferation. So the two blocks could still come together under the umbrella of the UN and solve some global problems and some regional problems. So I think if we take, let's say, the ideological layers out of the UN a little bit, and make it maybe more like a thinner, more representation and more functional institution, I think that it's possible that it again can become this bridge that it was in the Cold War.
The book proposes, among other things, partnerships in the middle and Helsinki 2.0, compromise that attempts to reconcile universal principles with greater restraint on intervention. Is this realistic or simply the best available alternative to a much more dangerous world?
Partnerships in the middle is happening as we speak. The question is, are they working yet? I would say there is some improvement to be made. I think we all have to learn how to maneuver, how to navigate the wolf world. But I think this is what everyone's trying. I mean, I can give you hundreds of examples of these kind of partnerships in the middle where countries try to come together to find some sort of policy space again. So this is not some pipe dream. It is being experimented as we speak. But I think it has to be improved, but because we all have to learn the new rules of the game, and some of these initiatives have not yet delivered what the promise was. The Helsinki 2.0 is not something that I would imagine is going to happen 2026, 2027. I think for that we need another administration in the White House, but also we need a little bit like a cooler relationship between the great powers, which is feasible. I mean, China and the US at their last summit in Beijing have called for constructive strategic stability, which is a fancy word to say let's not have our conflict escalate, let's have some guardrails. I think that would be a good step forward. If that could work, that the competition is being run through some guardrails, then we come into a similar situation like the East and the West. We're trying to compete within a detained framework in the latter half of the Cold War, where, let's say, the immediate threat of direct conflict was just much reduced, and some sort of collaboration between the blocs became possible again, right? So if that happens, then I think maybe we're becoming in a little bit more benign situation where you can think about the future.
Mark, let me end with a question that perhaps goes to the heart of your book. If the liberal order is no longer available and no single power is capable of imposing the next order, then what is the one principle that the architects of the next international system absolutely must get right?
Well, at the core, and now it's very nice, we can bridge back to Thomas Hobbes's puzzle back then, right? The interesting thing is, how was that time of his resolved. You know, in Europe we call about the 30-year war, but actually it was 100 years of warfare which had heavily religious undertones. Today you would say ideological blocks for fighting with each other. And what solved it was the Peace of Westphalia. So the organizing principles that emerged through that conflict were sovereignty, territorial integrity, and non-interference. And that was, let's say, the basic layer, the basic organizing principles for the international order for 500 years. And the interesting thing is this, and I also want to say that to my friends, right, who are saying, so are you now giving up on liberalism and human rights? On the contrary, actually what developed out of this was you know, an idea that if there is no universal order that is being imposed by one singular power, that competition can be a good thing. Competition became the engine of our market economy. Competition became actually the logic of democracy and political party competition. Competition between ideas is the basic of pluralism and tolerance, right? So the very enlightenment that you talked about grew out of this compromise that back in the day maybe no one wanted, but became the organizing principle. And I think now that we're living in a world which is so much bigger, it's the whole planet with all these civilizations and countries and cultures, I think we have to be more agnostic, right? We cannot all adhere to a high standard of the same values. We have to be a little bit more pluralistic. And I think that is the main idea of Helsinki 2.0.
Thank you so much for coming over, helping us understand the geopolitical shifts and also the deeper ideas that are shaping these shifts around. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Our guest's book asks a difficult question. What order can stabilize the wolf world? Perhaps that is a question that concerns not only great powers, but every country and every citizen who has to navigate the world that emerges from this transition. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for watching Geopod.
In the natural splendor, the silver-like peaks or the Himalayas glisten. Cradling a pond filled with milk in its lap, the Numbur Himal gleams. The Dudkunda, meaning a milk pond in Nepal's northeastern district of Solukhumbu, is truly the gateway to the paradise. The Numbur, Khatang and Karyalung mountains seem to smile at all times. Adorned with a garland of colorful flowers, the Dudkunda is overflowing as if filled with milk. The very sight defines nature at its best. Feels as if the Numbur mountain is giving motherly affection, holding the lake in its lap. The beauty is so serene and virgin that one fears not to stain it by touching. Indeed, Dudkunda is nature at its purest form. Located at Solu Dudkunda municipality, Taksindu, the natural paradise draws many visitors. No matter how many words are spent describing it, they all feel inadequate upon reaching there. The name itself is fulfilling and equally sacred.
हजारौं नरनारीहरू चाहिँ तीर्थयात्रीहरू दुधकुण्डमा जानुभएको छ। म पनि पुगेर आएँ। दुधकुण्ड असाध्यै पवित्र स्थल, यो हिमाल काखमा रहेको तीर्थस्थल हो, पुण्यस्थल हो, देवस्थल हो र त्यहाँ चाहिँ एकचोटि पुग्नै पर्दो रहेछ। त्यहाँ पुगेर जुन आनन्दको अनुभूति हुन्छ त्यो चाहिँ कहीँ पनि पाइँदैन भन्ने चाहिँ महसुस भयो।
आनन्द लाग्यो, मस्त लाग्यो। अनि यो ठाउँमा चाहिँ आएर तपस्या गरेर बस्नु जस्तो लाग्यो मलाई।
एकदमै राम्रो लाग्यो हैन, प्रकृतिले दिएको रमणीय तीर्थस्थल हैन। जो कोही पनि एकचोटि चाहिँ यहाँ आएर एकचोटि भ्रमण गरेर दर्शन गर्नुपर्छ जस्तो लाग्यो।
Situated at an altitude of 4,531 meters above the sea level, Dudkunda is a sacred pilgrimage site of culture and nature. It feels like nature has blessed this place, and culturally, it has bound all castes and ethnicities in a thread of unity. There are various legends and sayings about Dudkunda. One argument is that the pond was formed during the creation of the Himalayas and was discovered by local sheep and yak herders. According to another legend, in ancient times, a yak would go to a stone where the pond is located and offer its milk every day. Later, the place was found to be a pond filled with milk, leading to its name, Dudkunda. This has also led to the belief that gods and goddesses reside here. There are 3 different routes to reach Dudkunda. One route is through Salleri, Faplu, Taksindu and Sasrabeni. Another route goes via Lukla, the gateway to the Everest, through Nuntala, Taksindu and Sahasrabeni. Nature has truly blessed the Solu Dudkunda municipality. Truly, just like the majestic Mount Everest, Dudkunda has the potential to be the destination for everyone in the days to come. It is a thread of unity among all castes and ethnicities. Just like the holy water of Dudkunda, it will become a pure and excellent destination.
हिरण्यबाहवे हिरण्यवर्णाय हिरण्यरूपाय हिरण्यपतये अम्बिकापतये उमापतये पशुपतये नमो नमः।
The United States has imposed sweeping new economic sanctions on Iran, expanding restrictions to 5 additional sectors as the Trump administration intensifies its campaign to isolate Tehran from the global economy. The latest measures target Iran's aviation, digital assets, gold, shipping, and technology sectors. Washington also announced the suspension of several general licenses covering certain educational activities and services, personal remittances, and sports and academic expenses. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said Washington is increasing economic pressure on Iran and warned that individuals and entities helping Tehran move or launder the money could be cut off from the U.S. dollar system.
Teams from Treasury, State, and the U.S. military are now meeting with their global counterparts to tell them that the United States expects action. Every country has a defined timeline to shut down activities we have identified. If they do not take action, we will do so unilaterally through Treasury authorities. For example, every branch of Bank Melay must be shuttered and dark. And let me be clear, any entity that facilitates money laundering on behalf of Iran will be removed from the U.S. dollar system. The clock just started ticking.
Iran, meanwhile, has said Tehran is fully prepared to counter the sanctions, describing the measures as another potential defeat for Washington. Meanwhile, China also criticized the U.S. move and said it would safeguard its interest. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian said China-Iran cooperation has been conducted within the framework of international law and should not be disrupted by external interference.
经济战极限施压无助于解决问题，只会进一步激化矛盾冲突，造成风险外溢，扰乱全球的经济金融秩序，损害他国正当权益。当务之急是推动局势降温，尽快回归对话谈判轨道。中方将采取一切必要措施，坚定维护自身权益。
The new sanctions mark a further escalation in Washington's economic pressure campaign against Tehran, while Iran and China signal they will resist efforts to isolate the Iranian economy. Ukraine marked the 35th anniversary of its independence with a ceremony in central Kiev honoring soldiers and those killed during the country's war with Russia. President Volodymyr Zelensky attended the ceremony alongside UK Prime Minister Andy Burnham and European Council President Antonio Costa. Burnham's visit to Kiev is the first foreign trip since taking the office. He said Ukraine had endured years of Russian aggression aimed at undermining its independence. Zelensky reaffirmed Ukraine's sovereignty during the ceremony, saying the country would remain independent. The anniversary comes as Ukraine continues to face the ongoing Russian invasion, with the government and its international partners maintaining calls for continued support for the country. Around 1 million children in Afghanistan are suffering from life-threatening severe acute malnutrition, according to UNICEF. Speaking to reporters in Geneva, UNICEF's representative in the country, Tazuddin Oyewala, warned that without treatment, the children may face a high risk of death. He said babies under 6 months account for about 40% of children admitted to hospitals with severe wasting and medical complications, highlighting the scale of nutritional crisis among Afghanistan's youngest children.
Across the country, 3.7 million children suffer from wasting. They are acutely malnourished, including 1 million children who are suffering from life-threatening severe acute malnutrition. Nearly 40% of children admitted to hospitals with severe wasting and medical complications are babies under the age of 6 months old. And children who are under 2 years account for more than 80% of severe acute malnutrition cases that we are recording across the country.
UNICEF is calling for continued humanitarian support and access to treatment for severely malnourished children as the country faces persistent humanitarian needs. It added urgent treatment is critical to preventing further deaths among the children affected by severe malnutrition.
Antarctica's ice sheet gained about 695 billion metric tons of mass between 2021 and 2023, temporarily slowing its long-term ice loss, according to an international study published in Nature on August 19. Researchers from China, the United States, Hungary, and Japan said unusually warm waters in the Western Pacific triggered atmospheric changes that brought heavier snowfall to East Antarctica, offsetting some ice lost through melting. The researchers stressed that the increase is likely temporary and does not reverse Antarctica's long-term ice loss trend. They added the recent ice gain was driven by changes in the tropical Western Pacific, where unusually warm sea temperatures reshaped atmospheric circulation. West Antarctica continues to lose ice, while warmer oceans threaten glaciers in East Antarctica. Between 2003 and 2024, Antarctica lost an average of about 140.5 billion metric tons of ice each year, making the ice sheet a major factor in future global sea level rise. Harvesting has begun for traditionally produced black hive honey in Antalya of Turkey, where beekeepers continue a centuries-old method of honey production. The distinctive honey is produced in wooden hives made from hollowed-out tree trunks, some of which have been passed down through generations. Unlike modern hives, the bees build their own honeycombs naturally inside the traditional hives. Beekeepers say the honey's flavor comes from nectar collected from the plateau's rich vegetation, including thyme, kivan, and other flowering plants. During the annual harvest, honeycombs are carefully removed piece by piece from the back of the wooden hives. Beekeepers say the enclosed structure helps retain the natural aroma of the honey. While modern hives with artificial honeycombs are also used in the region, producers say black hive honey remains highly valued for its traditional production method and distinctive taste. The once-a-year harvest marks the culmination of a season of beekeeping, with the locally produced honey now making its way from the traditional hives to consumers. Sufi Muslims gathered in the coastal city of Sidon in southern Lebanon to commemorate Mawlid al-Nabawi, the birth anniversary of Prophet Muhammad, in a religious observance marked by prayers, devotion, and traditional ceremonies. The occasion brought worshippers together to honor the life and teachings of the Prophet, with religious gatherings reflecting the spiritual traditions of Sufi communities. Mawlid is observed by many Muslims around the world, although the way it is marked varies across communities and countries. In Sidon, the celebrations offered a moment for worshippers to come together in remembrance and prayer, with the city's historic religious heritage providing a backdrop to the observance. For Sufi Muslims, Mawlid is an opportunity to express devotion to Prophet Muhammad and reflect on values associated with his life, including compassion, humility, and faith. The commemoration also serves as an important cultural and religious gathering for communities seeking to preserve their traditions. The observance comes as Sidon, one of Lebanon's oldest coastal cities, continues to host religious and cultural events that reflect the country's diverse Islamic heritage.
Anime and manga fans gathered in Kenya's Nairobi for the Otamatsuri convention with cosplayers transforming themselves into characters from popular Japanese animation, comics, and video games. The event provided a space for fans to meet, socialize, and showcase elaborate costumes inspired by their favorite characters. For many attendees, cosplay is a passion-driven hobby rather than a commercial activity. Participants say the convention offers an important opportunity to connect with others, particularly for fans who have limited chances to socialize in person. The growing popularity of events such as Otamatsuri reflects a rising interest in anime, manga, and Japanese pop culture among young people in Kenya. Cosplayers say they continue to invest time and effort into the hobby for the creativity, community, and enjoyment it provides. Japan's Hiroshiki Castle is undergoing a process called Hikimodoshi, where the castle tower is being pulled back to its original location. An event is taking place where the public can experience the process. Participants pulled on 4 ropes attached to the steel framework supporting the castle tower, gradually moving the approximately 400-ton structure. The castle tower had been moved to a temporary site about 70 meters away in 2015 to have large-scale repairs done to the stone walls. The repair work completed 2 years ago, and the operation to return the castle to its original location entered full swing. The event is taking place until the 30th of August with approximately 4,000 participants from within and outside the prefecture chosen by a lottery. The castle tower is scheduled to return to its original location sometime in November.
At 88, renowned Malian singer and dancer continues to command the stage with an energy that belies her age, drawing audiences into the traditional rhythms of Mali. Known as the Nightingale of Belodigu, she performs barefoot, wearing a belt of cowrie shells around her waist, as she brings the sounds and cultural traditions of an earlier generation to audiences in Mali and abroad. Her performances are part of an effort to preserve age-old musical traditions at a time when modern technology and new musical styles are rapidly changing the country's soundscape. The veteran artist says the influence of new technology is significantly altering ancestral music, making it increasingly important for younger generations to reconnect with traditional forms. She believes looking back to the roots of Malian music is essential to keeping its cultural identity alive. Through her performances, the singer continues to pass on the rhythms and traditions of her heritage, helping ensure that the musical legacy of a bygone Mali is not forgotten.
Hello and welcome to The Perspective. I'm Sabika Shrestha, your host for the program. From major headlines to the issues behind them, we gather week's top stories and explore how they are shaping the path forward. In this episode, we discuss Nepal's major administrative and fiscal reforms, from restructuring ministries and reducing civil service positions to the nationwide rollout of fortnightly salaries for federal employees. We explore what the O&M survey means for government staffing, how the public views the proposed job cuts, and how Nepal's new 15-day salary system compares with practices around the world. The RSP government, in its 100-day plan, had announced swift and result-oriented bureaucracy. In line with the aim, the Organization and Management O&M survey have been conducted at almost all government entities at war footing. The aim is to identify the workforce based on the service delivery and the demand of the organization. The survey has proposed significant changes to staffing across 18 ministries, with 15 ministries having submitted their revised structures so far. Here's an explanatory story. The National Personnel Records Office, which maintains updated records of all civil servants, said staffing registration process for 13 of the 15 ministries and their subordinate offices has been completed in the last 5 months. The staffing details of 2 ministries were submitted only recently and their registration process has begun. The office said the entire process for 10 ministries has been completed and the details have already been sent back to the respective ministries. According to Director and Information Officer Sudan Kwakali Sreshta, the staffing structures of the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Agriculture are still pending.
15वटा मध्येमा पनि 13वटाको चाहिँ हामीले काम सम्पन्न गरिसकेका छौं त्यो आएको विदिन 2-3 दिन भित्रमै त्यो संख्या हेरेर आज मात्रै पनि 2वटाको आइपुगेको छ अब आउन बाँकी चाहिँ 18 मध्येमा 15वटा आइसकेपछि 3वटाको चाहिँ बाँकी छ 3वटाको मा परराष्ट्र मन्त्रालय कृषि वन मन्त्रालय र अर्थ मन्त्रालयको चाहिँ आउन बाँकी चाहिँ देखिएको छ सायद केही दिनमा आउँछ होला.
An analysis of the 10 ministries whose staffing registration process has been completed shows that 500 positions have been cut from their previous staffing levels, while the analysis of the remaining ministries is yet to come.
संगठन संरचना कर्मचारीको टोटल कति आउँछ केन्द्रमा कति आउँछ चाहिन्छ प्रदेशमा कति चाहिन्छ र स्थानीयमा कति चाहिन्छ एउटा खाका तयार हुन्छ र कामको नेचर अनुसार हामीले दरबन्दीहरूको व्यवस्थापन गर्दै जानुपर्छ. अब मलाई जे आशा लाग्छ दरबन्दी घटाउनु भन्दा पनि कहाँनेरि दरबन्दी आवश्यकता छ र कहाँनेरि दरबन्दी घटाउनु पर्ने छ समग्रमा पहिला त्यो विचार गर्नु पर्यो.
Conducting an organization and management survey from time to time is a normal part of administrative reform. However, a comprehensive study should be carried out to eliminate unnecessary positions while adding positions where they are genuinely required. According to the staffing structures submitted so far, the Office of the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers had 952 positions previously, which has now been reduced by 3 to 949 positions. The Ministry of Home Affairs has increased its staffing from 2,856 to 3,038, adding 182 positions. The Ministry of Women, Children and Senior Citizens, Gender and Sexual Minorities and Social Security has increased its staffing from 151 to 174 positions, adding 23 posts. The Ministry of Energy, Water Resources and Irrigation has seen the largest reduction, with 400 positions cut, bringing its staffing down from 1,226 to 826. The Ministry of Culture, Tourism and Civil Aviation has reduced its staffing by 166 positions from 724 to 558. The Ministry of Education and Sports has cut 139 positions, reducing its staffing from 1,043 to 904. The Ministry of Land Management, Cooperatives, Federal Affairs and General Administration has reduced its staffing by 135 positions from 418 to 283. The Ministry of Industry, Commerce and Supplies has cut 92 positions, bringing its staffing down from 789 to 697. The Ministry of Information and Communications has reduced its staffing by 52 positions from 233 to 181. The Ministry of Youth, Labour and Employment has reduced its staffing by 25 positions from 371 to 346. The Ministry of Defence has cut 18 positions, reducing its staffing from 83 to 65. The Ministry of Health and Food Safety has reduced its staffing by 13 positions from 1,914 to 1,899. The Ministry of Law, Justice and Parliamentary Affairs has reduced its staffing by 10 positions from 124 to 114. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation has created 90 new positions, according to the National Personnel Records Office. In this context, we ask the public what they think about the government's plan to reduce civil service jobs. Here's what public had to say.
योजनाहरू ठिकै छ अहिलेको अवस्थामा जुन हुनुपर्ने कुरोहरू हो त्यो एकदम ठिक छ
यसले के हुन्छ भने हैन नेपालमा जस्तो यानी आम पब्लिक आम जनतालाई राहत हुन्छ काम यानी इजी हुन्छ
सरकारले जुन कर्मचारी घटाइरहेको छ त्यसमा चाहिँ राम्रै कुरो हो तर के छ भने सरकारमाथि जुन परेको छ आर्थिक भार त्यो कम त हुन्छ
अब प्रक्रियागत माने भर्ना भए जनतालाई सही के रे जे सेवा उपलब्ध हुन्छ त्यही कुरा हाम्रो विचारमा छ
सेवामा पूर्वामा कुनै किसिमको व्यवधान हुनु भएन यो मात्रै मुख्य कुरा हो र सामान्य कर्मचारी कटौती गर्दा कि त्यस्तो खराब अप्ठ्यारो हुन्छ
Nepal is all set to become the first South Asian country to pay federal civil servants every 15 days, replacing the existing monthly salary system. The new arrangement will begin from August 31, while provincial and local government employees remain outside the system for now. We will look at how the new system works and how it compares with salary practices around the world.
Moving away from the long-standing practice of monthly pay, the Nepal's Ministry of Finance has ordered federal offices to issue salaries and allowances every 15 days. This makes Nepal the absolute first country in South Asia to test bi-monthly system. Regional giants like India, Pakistan and Bangladesh still strictly stick to a single end-of-the-month payday. While this is a new trend to our region, getting paid twice a month is already an established practice in several major global economies. United States, Canada, Australia, Brazil and the Philippines have heavily utilized bi-weekly or semi-monthly pay systems for years to keep cash flowing through their markets. But as this trend-breaking pilot transitions into a nationwide federal rollout this month, it is sparking intense debate. Let's take a look at the economic pros and cons of this major reform. The primary goal is economic stimulation. Finance Minister Dr. Swarnim Wagle noted during the system's launch that injecting around 10 billion rupees into the market every 2 weeks will instantly boost consumer demand and aid small businesses. Furthermore, it offers immediate relief to lower labor workers, saving them from high-interest short-term loans just to pay daily groceries at the end of the month. However, this also brings massive administrative pressure. Doubling the pay cycle literally doubles the workload for accounting staff. The Financial Controller General Office had to temporarily pause the program earlier this summer to fix severe software configuration glitches within the computerized government account system. There are also complex challenges in accurately calculating monthly tax deductions and pension funds across 2 separate pay periods. Whether this bold move will permanently modernize the South Asian workforce or collapse under administrative weight remains to be seen.
To discuss more on this issue, we are virtually joined by Dr. Prakash Kumar Shrestha, former Vice Chair of National Planning Commission of Nepal. Welcome to The Perspective, sir.
Thank you very much.
So how practical is the government's plan to reduce civil service positions? Can it genuinely improve efficiency in service delivery?
Well, it shouldn't be good to say reducing. It should be a restructuring. Maybe the number could be same, but the right people should be in the right number. That's why government should restructure. In my experience, I found that there are some over surplus human resources, manpower in some places, some offices, and in some kind of human resources, but the shortage normally shortage in a technical manpower in technical offices. So that's why there should be the restructuring instead of saying reducing the size of the human resources in the government structure.
With the O&M survey proposing changes across ministries, what should be the key criteria for deciding which positions and institutions are essential for effective service delivery?
That should depends on role and responsibilities of the institutions and the responsibilities of the federal government. Given the federal systems, now we have the three tiers of system. That's why without duplications, without the overlapping of the functions, this the O&M service should define the exact roles and so that there will be the right number of people with the right types of skill that is needed. Now, actually, the government should increase the capacity to deliver the public services and like some technical manpower needed for the execution of the capital expenditures or the management of the projects.
Sir, how can Nepal's broader federal restructuring, particularly the roles and responsibilities of the federal, provincial and local governments, affect the size and structure of the civil service?
Obviously, we are in the federal system. Now we have three tiers of governments, and our constitutions already demarcated what are the role of all these three tiers. So there should be the clear distributions of the role and responsibility and works. There should be some additional laws so that some concurrent duties or responsibility can be clarified. Based on that only, we should decide the size of the number of the employees in federal, province, and local. There shouldn't be the duplications and the right distribution of the work given their capacity, and we should also increase the capacity of the subnational government. And now, actually, we should hand over as much as functions that the subnational government can do, so that the central government can focus on the policy, laws, and foreign relations, only the main and the big projects. So that's why there should be clear demarcations of the function among the three tiers of government.
Mr. Shrestha, could reducing federal government positions create a leaner and more productive bureaucracy, or could it weaken the government's capacity to deliver essential public services? What do you think?
It depends on how we do. Actually, as I said earlier, it should be the effective restructuring so that the public service delivery or governance effectiveness will be increased. Just reducing haphazard reduction only the in number may not be able to deliver the expected outcome. That's why there should be the right people and right number in right places. And that's why the strategically and doing the deep analysis given these current conditions, federal conditions, and our role and responsibility, and depending on the people's expectation, the government should deliver the people's expectations. Now, people have the very high expectation from the government. So, considering all of these things, there should be the restructuring, and that makes obviously government will be linear and more effective.
So what would be the actual economic and fiscal impact of shifting federal civil employees from monthly to fortnightly salaries?
Yes, the new system government has started actually in the other country, in the advanced country, this type of system already in place. And obviously it increased the income cycles and the velocity of cash flow. So that the government, the people, actually the employees will make the expenses in higher frequency, so that the retail business and the consumers goods producer or there's the market can get benefit, but some administrative hassle or some administrative cost for the government will increase because the government has to now do the same function twice in a month. That will increase some administrative cost for the government. But overall, for the economy, it's a good. In the some country, even I know that there is weekly payments, even weekly payments of rents or any other wages. So increasing the frequency obviously is good for the economy to make a payment so that there will not be a due for the long in the market.
Lastly, Mr. Shrestha, at a time when government is focusing on fiscal discipline and administrative reform, should the priority be a smaller government workforce, better paid and more productive employees, or a fundamental restructuring of the federal system? What do you think?
Obviously, objectives should be to make the government small but more effective. For that, there should be the right number with the right capacity of the people, of the employees, and the government also should focus on increasing the capacity of the employees. And obviously, we need, given the resources, given the revenue collections capacity, government should be small as possible, as far as possible, but should deliver the what the people expect and should deliver their role and responsibilities defined by the Nepal's constitutions.
Thank you for your time and insights, sir. Meanwhile, the government has decided to increase salary grants for teachers, early childhood development facilitators and school employees working under federal grants. The cabinet has approved a 10% increase in existing salary grants for teachers under the federal teaching support scheme. Monthly pay for secondary level teachers will rise from 43,669 rupees to 48,058 rupees, while basic level teachers will receive 38,203 rupees, up from 34,730 rupees. The government will also add 5,000 rupees per month to salary grants for ECD facilitators, school employees and school support staff. Nepali migrant workers who die abroad after traveling through unauthorized channels face a legal barrier to returning home even in death. As Nepal currently lacks a clear procedure to repatriate their bodies, with several such bodies stranded in different countries, the government has now begun drafting a procedure to address the legal gap and facilitate their return. Here's a report.
For weeks, Junu Rai has been waiting for one thing: to bring her husband, Santosh Rai's body, home from Cambodia. Santosh had travelled to Cambodia for foreign employment through India after paying around 700,000 Nepali rupees, but died of a heart attack less than a year later. His family's efforts to repatriate his body ran into a major legal barrier because he had travelled without proper documents and through an unauthorized route.
म जस्तै सबै अन्यलमा नपरुन् नफसुन् अब मेरो जस्तै विपद परेको बेलामा यो कति गाह्रो हुने रहेछ श्रम नगरिकन जाँदाखेरि अब जानीहरूले पनि परिवारको पनि कुरा सुन्देर जाउन् जानीहरूले अब मेरो त श्रीमानले परिवारको कुरा सुन्नु भएन आफ्नै जिद्दीपनाले पनि साथीको लैलैमा लागेर पनि जानुभयो.
Junu came to Kathmandu seeking government help, while lawmaker Ashika Tamang repeatedly raised the case in the parliament. The case has now exposed a wider problem. The foreign ministry says the bodies of around 10 Nepalis who died abroad after travelling through unauthorized channels are currently stranded in different countries. Officials say Nepal previously had no clear legal procedure to repatriate such bodies, but following growing pressure, the government has now drafted a procedure and sent it to the finance ministry for approval.
कार्यविधि बनाएर हामीले अहिले अर्थ मन्त्रालयमा पठाएका छौं. अर्थ मन्त्रालयबाट स्वीकृति प्राप्त हुने बित्तिकै यो कार्यविधि कार्यान्वयनमा आउँछ र हामीले सकेसम्म अहिले हामीले कार्यविधिमा केही सीमित प्रस्तावहरू मात्रै गरेका छौं. त्यसमा सब फिर्ताको विषयमा कोमा अथवा चाहिँ विशेष हिसाबले उपचार त्यसमा पनि केही सीमितता राखेका छौं. जस्तै अनलिमिटेड पैसा लाग्यो भने 1 करोड अथवा 50 लाख रुपैयाँ लाग्यो भने के गर्ने भन्दा हामीले चाहिँ यसलाई 12 लाख रुपैयाँ सम्म चाहिँ नेपाल सरकारको क्याप राखेका छौं. यो प्रस्तावित कार्यविधिमा अर्थले अझै त्यो प्रक्रियामा नै छ.
For workers who travel through legal channels, insurance and repatriation support are already available through the Foreign Employment Board. Last fiscal year alone, more than 1,200 Nepali workers' bodies were brought back to Nepal through the formal system. Now, the government faces the challenge of creating a system that can also bring home those who fall outside that legal safety net.
That's the perspective for this week. We'll be back next week with other major highlights. Stay tuned to NTV World.
What if I told you a story of a place shrouded in mystery and steeped in stones? A place where warriors were born and raised, and their path through the mountains still remain to this day. Ajirkot Gorkha, the unbeaten kingdom.
हामी पाहुनाहरू आउनु हुँदाखेरि हामी यसरी स्वागत गर्छौं अनि अलि नाचगानहरू पनि देखाउँछौं। गर्व लाग्छ जन्मिएछु साथै स्वर्गमा म त नेपालकी छोरी भन्छन् गोर्खाली। नाचहरू जस्तो घाटु चुड्काहरू भन्ने चाहिँ विशेष गरी हुन्छ यहाँ।
For those seeking a luxurious escape, there are stunning lodges that offer an indulgent retreat amidst the rugged beauty of this place. For the true adventurers, this place has it all, from trekking through dense forest of Nagepokari trails to exploring ancient temples and learning the rich history of the region. So, what do you fancy? Are you the solo explorer, or do you prefer luxury within nature? Or perhaps you are the one who seeks to witness it all. Well, after all, life is a box of chocolates, and this place is filled with surprises. Welcome to the place where magic and reality intertwine, where the wonders of nature are both breathtaking and awe-inspiring. From the elevations of 300 meters to a towering 8,000 meters, this place will leave you mesmerized and in awe.
Lumbini province is home to many well-known tourism destinations in the country. The province has not only contributed to domestic tourism, but also played an important role in promoting Nepal as a tourism destination at the international forums. Lumbini province is the birthplace of the Light of Asia, Lord Gautama Buddha. Rich in religious, cultural and natural heritages, Lumbini province is also a paradise for wildlife. Lumbini is the birthplace of Lord Gautama Buddha. Lumbini area is a major tourist destination of Nepal with numerous attractions for tourists. Lumbini, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, holds special significance for every Buddhist around the world for its historic and religious importance. This place attracts tourists from predominantly Buddhist countries including Thailand, Sri Lanka, India, Japan, Bhutan, Myanmar, South Korea, among others. Swargadwari. The Swargadwari, literally meaning gateway to heaven, temple in Bhutan is a famous religious tourism site in Nepal. Swargadwari is a piece of heaven on earth geographically. Situated 2,200 meters above the sea level, this is the revered Swargadwari temple on top of a hill surrounded by jungle. According to myth, this place got its name Swargadwari because the 5 Panda brothers used this place as the gateway to travel all the way to heaven. The panoramic view from the Swargadwari temple, comprising 3 mountains above 8,000 meters in height and dozens of other peaks, is a treat to the eyes. Hundreds of thousands of religious tourists reach Swargadwari temple every year from Nepal as well as India. It has become much easier now to reach the holy site, encouraging many domestic tourists as well. Swargadwari of Bhutan is an epitome of faith for Hindus, the gateway to heaven, a holy site and a pious land. One can reach Swargadwari by air or roadway travel to Nepalganj from Kathmandu, bus ride to Vrigi and 5 hours walk to the temple. Bardia National Park. The Bardia National Park is the largest conservation area in Nepal's Tarai. Bardia National Park is home to Bengal tiger, one-horned rhinos, endangered Krishnasar or the black buck, and crocodiles. Bardia National Park is the second largest tiger sanctuary in Nepal. The longest concrete bridge of 1,015 meters in Nepal over Karnali River at Gerua Ghat, Babai Valley, Karnali River, Krishnasar or Black Buck Conservation Area at Khairapur. Tharu culture and homestays are some of the attractions in Bardia. The national park offers elephant ride, jungle safari, jungle walk, rafting among others for tourists. Bardia is a natural paradise and a must-visit place in Western Nepal for domestic and foreign tourists. The number of tourists visiting Bardia National Park is steadily on the rise in recent years. The best season for visiting the national park is September till April every year. Banke and Bardia National Parks, two different national parks spreading across Banke and Bardia districts in western Nepal, home of many endangered wild animals and a hub for domestic and foreign tourists. The attractions: one-horned rhinos, gharial crocodiles, dolphin, among other wildlife. Rani Mahal. The Rani Mahal, or the Queen's Palace in Palpa district, is renowned as the Taj Mahal of Nepal. The Rani Mahal, or the Queen's Palace in Palpa district, is renowned as the Taj Mahal of Nepal. This palace at the banks of Kaligandaki River and on top of a huge rock stands on the northern side of the river as a symbol of love. General Khadga Shamsher built the palace with Western architecture in memory of his wife Queen Tej Kumari. The beautiful 56 feet tall 4-story palace houses a pond, garden and temple inside its premises. The palace, surrounded by jungle on the banks of whistling Kaligandaki, is located at the border of Palpa, Gulmi and Sangja districts. The very location and the beauty of the palace is mesmerizing. Palpa has seen sudden rise in number of tourists of late, mainly to visit this palace.
Lumbini province
has many tourism destinations. Over 3 million domestic and 200,000 foreign tourists visit this province every year. Among the foreign tourists in Province 5, majority are from India. Along with exploring new destinations, the existing sites are also being conserved and preserved in this province. Some of the other sites of touristic importance in this province are Ruru area, Supa Deuradi, Jaljala area, Dang Valley, Safruli. All the districts in the province have at least a revered Hindu temple and draw religious tourists. The demographic mix of Tharu, Magar, Awadhi, Muslim and Khas Arya tradition offers their own cultural peasantry for tourists. Nepalganj, which is the gateway to Mansarovar in China for Indian tourists, makes the province rich in terms of tourism.
Lumbini province
is a major tourism destination in the country with immense potential. The internationally renowned religious and tourism sites are the base for prosperity for
Lumbini province.
Nepal faces renewed calls for tougher action on rape. Bara juvenile case reignites debate over punishment. Quick fix plan for public services launched in Nepal. High traffic officers given 30-day deadline for improvements. Nepal's poultry farmers take to streets over mounting losses. Protesters demand action against middlemen and illegal chicken imports. India and China hold fresh talks on border disputes. Two sides discuss peace, stability and bilateral ties. U.S. widens economic sanctions on Iran. New sanctions hit aviation, shipping, gold and technology. And Nepal begins ACC Premier Cup preparations in style. Defeat Malaysia by 9 wickets in warm-up match. Good evening, I'm Sarah Sapsana Marai and this is NTV World News Hour coming to you live from Kathmandu at 2200 hours Nepal time. Now the news in detail. Public outrage is growing in Nepal after the rape and murder of a girl child in Simara Bara, where both the victim and the accused were minors. The case has renewed calls for tougher punishment, including demands for the death penalty. But legal experts say the problem is not simply a lack of harsh laws. They point to weak investigations, poor enforcement and lengthy court proceedings. Nepal police records show around 2,000 to 2,500 rape and attempted rape cases registered annually, with more than half involving victims under 18. Experts also say many alleged offenders are known to their victims, including relatives, neighbors, teachers and acquaintances. They argue Nepal needs stronger implementation of existing laws, faster justice and grassroots prevention, not punishment alone. The focus, they say, must shift from making laws tougher to making the entire justice system more effective. More on this in detail in our Issue of the Day segment later in the bulletin. Nepal's government has launched a new action plan to make public services faster, simpler, more transparent and citizen-friendly. The Public Service Immediate Improvement Action Plan 2083 aims to reduce waiting times, costs, paperwork and unnecessary visits to government offices. Prime Minister's office spokesperson Hemraj Aryal said the action plan aims to end unnecessary visits to government offices, provide clear information on required documents and procedures, reduce service delivery time and costs, and also expand the use of technology.
यो कार्ययोजनाले खास गरी नागरिकका समस्यालाई तत्कालै पहिचान गर्ने, विगतमा गरेका भनौं कमी कमजोरीहरूलाई चाहिँ त्यसको कारण पत्ता लगाउने र त्यसको आधारमा कुनै समस्याहरूको पहिचान गरेर भविष्यमा त्यस्ता खालका समस्याहरू आउन नदिनको लागि तत्काल समाधान गर्ने, क्विक फिक्स भनेको विगतको लर्निङको आधारमा चाहिँ गर्ने विषय हो यो, ताकि नागरिकलाई सदा सर्वदा एकै प्रकृतिका समस्याहरू चाहिँ नदोहोरिरहन्।
Authorities have set a 30-day target for visible improvements in high-traffic services, including passports, transport, land registration and district administration. Poultry farmers from across the country staged a sit-in protest at Maitighar Mandala in centre of Kathmandu with a 12-point charter of demands, warning that unchecked middlemen and unstable prices are pushing the industry toward collapse. Poultry farmers presented a 12-point list of demands to draw the government's attention to problems facing their profession. Their central demand: a minimum support price fixed on production costs, an end to the monopoly of middlemen in the market, and the authority to set chicken prices themselves. Farmers say they are being cheated at every stage of the market through manipulated weighing scales, unexplained middlemen deductions, and price cuts of up to 10 to 20 rupees per kilogram imposed without justification. They are demanding an immediate end to these irregularities. More on this in our cover story segment later in the bulletin. Now, India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi held the 25th round of India-China border talks in Beijing today. The discussions focused on the India-China boundary question, maintaining peace and tranquility along the border, and advancing bilateral ties between the two countries. Before the boundary talks, Doval met Chinese Vice President Han Zheng in Beijing. Their meeting focused on strengthening peace and stability in the border areas and improving India-China relations in several areas, including economic, political and multilateral cooperation. Doval had arrived in Beijing on Monday for a 2-day visit at Yi's invitation. His visit comes at a time when India-China relations are gradually improving after a period of serious tension and a series of high-level diplomatic engagements between Modi and Xi. Iran has said it is confident it can counter widened U.S. sanctions after Washington announced what it described as an economic D-Day against the country to try to isolate it from the global economy. Iran's economy minister said Tehran was fully prepared for the sanctions, which he said would lead to another defeat for the US. The United States on Monday imposed massive new economic sanctions against Iran, expanding restrictions to 5 additional sectors in an effort to increase pressure on and further isolate the country. The sanctions are now extended to Iran's aviation, digital assets, gold, shipping and technology sectors. It also said that the US would suspend multiple general licenses related to Iran, covering certain educational activities and services, personal remittances and sports and academic exchanges. The latest measures represent a significant escalation in US pressure on Tehran, as US President Donald Trump's administration continues to pursue what it describes as a policy of maximum economic pressure. Meanwhile, China has said it would safeguard its interests after Washington outlined plans aimed at economic asphyxiation of Iran, a key economic partner of Beijing. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian said China-Iran cooperation had always been conducted within the framework of international law and should not be interfered with or disrupted.
经济战极限施压无助于解决问题，只会进一步激化矛盾冲突， 造成风险外溢，扰乱全球的经济金融秩序，损害他国正当权益。当务之急是推动局势降温，尽快回归对话谈判轨道。中方将采取一切必要措施，坚定维护自身权益。
Nepal defeated host Malaysia by 9 wickets in the practice match of the ACC Premier Cup at Selangor Turf Ground today, chasing a revised target of 228 runs in 48 overs after rain interrupted the match. Nepal reached the target in just 28 overs, losing 1 wicket. Opener Asif Sheikh top scored with 161 runs off 85 balls, while Arjun Kumar remained unbeaten on 61. Earlier, Malaysia were bowled out for 232 runs in 48.2 overs. Captain Sandeep Lamichhane took 4 wickets, while Karan Casey claimed 2. The match was part of Nepal's preparation for the ACC Premier Cup, beginning in Malaysia on August 30. Nepal will play Bahrain in its opening match on August 31st. If criminals do not spare minors, should the law spare them? A rape and murder case in Simara, Bara has sparked outrage and calls for tougher punishment. But experts say harsher laws alone may not be enough. What does Nepal really need? Our issue of the day segment after this break. You're watching NTV World News Hour. Welcome back. Time now for our cover story of the day. If criminals do not spare minors or elderly, why should the law? A question that is reverberating the streets of Nepal following a recent rape and murder case in Simara of Bara, where the victim as well as the accused are juvenile.
With rape cases continually coming to light in Nepal, public outrage has intensified, along with demands for harsher punishment. From parliament to the streets, voices have been called for the death penalty. However, legal analysts and criminology experts argue that the problem lies less in the length of the law or the absence of capital punishment and more in social attitudes, weak investigations, poor enforcement, and the complex psychology of offenders. After the rape and murder of Bara's young girl Garima Chaudhary, demands for strict legal action against such criminals have surged from the streets to Parliament. This is not the first time such demands have been raised. Debates have occurred many times before. Yet, legal experts emphasize that instead of creating new laws, the focus should be on effective implementation of existing ones. They suggest closing loopholes, strengthening enforcement from investigation to court proceedings, and ending the situation where victims must pursue cases for years in court. According to Nepal police statistics, an average of 2,000 to 2,500 cases of rape and attempted rape are registered annually in Nepal. More than 50% of victims are children under 18. Even more concerning, in most cases, the perpetrators are people known to the victims, neighbors, relatives, teachers, or acquaintances. Sexual violence by familiar individuals makes crime control even more complex. Psychiatrists therefore caution against viewing the mentality of sexual offenders merely as sexual desire or a simple mental illness. From ordinary citizens to policymakers, there are demands to amend laws and impose harsher punishment on rape offenders. But experts argue that rather than focusing only on legislation, both the state and society must work from the grassroots level to create an environment where such crimes do not occur in the first place.
That was our cover story of the day. Now, faster services, less paperwork and fewer trips to government offices. Nepal's government has unveiled a new action plan for citizen-friendly public services. But while the government promises reform, poultry farmers are demanding action too, warning that middlemen and unstable prices are pushing their industry toward collapse. Stay with us for our issue of the day after this break. You're watching News Hour here on NTV World. I'm Sarah Sapsanamarai. Welcome back. Time now for our issue of the day. Poultry farmers in Nepal have taken to the streets, protesting low farm gate prices, middlemen, and the illegal import of chicken and poultry products from India. They say rising production costs, poor quality chicks, and weak market prices are leaving them unable to recover their investment. The farmers have gathered in Kathmandu, demanding government action to protect domestic producers and remove middlemen from the poultry supply chain. Sabika Shrestha with Pramila Bhandari and Anil Thagal brings more.
Poultry farmers involved in raising chickens and eggs have stopped feeding their birds and taken to the streets in federal capital Kathmandu since Monday. Frustrated by the problem of their domestic production failing to fetch fair prices because of illegally smuggling of live chickens as well frozen chicken meat from India, the farmers have hit the streets. The farmers have gathered at Maitighar in Kathmandu to voice their grievances to the government for last 2 days. They complain of the hatcheries themselves selling poor quality chicks, resulting in abnormal mortality, weak growth, higher feed consumption and reduced production. Although the cost of chicks, feed, medicines, labor, electricity, water, poultry house management, interest, transportation and production risks have all increased, farmers say they are suffering losses. They say though the corresponding selling price for their chickens in butcheries is much higher compared to what they get. On the other hand, poultry entrepreneurs say that consumers are being forced to pay higher prices because of middlemen.
मेरो हातमा यो चल्ला यो तपाईले देख्नुभयो होला चल्ला हो तर यो चल्ला हैन यो ठुलो क्रोचमा भइसक्यो क्रोर हामीले जसलाई चिक्स भन्छौं हेर्दाखेरि चिक्स छ तर यो क्रोरमा भइसक्यो यो 24 दिनको भइसक्यो है तर नर्मली 24 दिनको कुखुराको न्यूनतम तौल चाहिँ 1 केजी हुनुपर्छ आज हेर्नु मेरो हातमा 200 ग्राम पनि छैन त्यसलाई मैले 80 रुपैयाँ हालेर किनेको है 80 रुपैयाँ हालेर आज 24 दिन हुँदै गर्दाखेरि यसले दाना पनि खाइसक्यो मेरो ब्रुडिङ कस्ट पनि खाइसक्यो हेक्लेर भने चाहिँ घाटाको आज यसलाई दाना दिने कम्पनी आज हामीलाई चल्ला बेच्ने कम्पनी औषधि दिने त घाटामा छैन नि त घाटामा भनेको को हामी किसान नै छौं.
The farmers have also drawn the government's attention to their demands, warning that the Nepali poultry sector will face an even deeper crisis if the same situation persists. The chickens produced domestically by farmers who make large investments cannot be sold as long as illegally imported products occupy the market. They have one clear demand: remove middlemen from poultry farms and provide relief to farmers. Sabika Shrestha, NTV World.
Nepal's poultry industry has grown into a major commercial farming sector, but behind its expanding scale, farmers face mounting risks. Numerous diseases, limited financial protection, and a complex marketing chain have made the business highly vulnerable. A report.
The Statistics Office survey counts nearly 22,900 commercial poultry farms, employing more than 63,800 people across the country. The sector generates about 61 billion rupees from meat, 14.8 billion from eggs, and 10.2 billion rupees from chicks every year. Yet only 4.1% of commercial farms have insurance, while just 37.3% use institutional credit. The industry is dominated by broiler production, with 92.8% of commercial farms raising birds for meat compared with 7.4% producing eggs. But farmers remain exposed to volatile markets and production costs. The official survey says market problems are the main reason cited by farms considering downsizing or closure. And between producers and consumers stands a fragmented value chain involving collectors, agrovetes, local vendors, commission agents, traders, wholesalers, and retailers. These intermediaries provide essential collection, transport, and marketing services, but multiple layers can also widen the gap between the farm gate and consumer prices. Disease presents an even greater threat. The 2026 bird flu outbreaks have affected poultry farms across multiple districts, forcing authorities to destroy birds and feed to contain the virus. For affected farmers, compensation is intended to cushion losses from officially ordered culling. But the compensation process itself has become a source of frustration. Farmers have reported delays in receiving payments, while compensation rules do not cover every loss. For example, birds that die before official culling may fall outside the compensation mechanism. For farmers already carrying loans and operating costs, the consequences extend beyond the loss of a flock. Nepal's poultry sector is therefore facing a critical question: how can a multi-billion rupee industry become financially safer for the farmers who carry much of its production risk? The answer lies in faster compensation, wider insurance coverage, transparent pricing, and more efficient links between farmers and consumers.
And in this context, we spoke to poultry business operators about how middlemen enter the poultry business and the problems they create. Let's hear what they had to say.
चल्ला गुणस्तरी हुन्छ जसले गर्दा हामीलाई घाटाको परिरहेको छ तपाईको अब दाना पनि गुणस्तर हिँड आइरहेको छ कुनै बेला दानाको समस्याले पनि हामीलाई घाटा परिरहेको छ तर हामीले त्यो गुणस्तर हिँड्छ यो तपाईको गुणस्तर पुगेको छैन भनेर हामीले कुनै ठाउँमा पनि तपाईको आफ्नो गुनासो गर्ने ठाउँ पाएनौं के हामीले हो त्यही कारणले पनि हामीले अब जुन हामीले अहिले आफ्नो भनौं न हक अधिकार हामीबाट छिन्निएको छ जस्तो कि हामीले कुखुरा बेच्न जाँदाखेरि पनि हामीले तोकेको मूल्य पाउँदैनौँ। जसले रेट तोकिरहेको छ त्यो किसान होइन।
45 दिनपछि हाम्रो गुणस्तरीय चल्ला नभएको कारणले गर्दा मर्न सुरु गर्छ। त्यसपछि फेरि उहाँहरूले चल्ला उठाइदिनु हुँदैन। अनि चल्ला उठाउनुहुन्छ तर उहाँहरूले कसरी भन्नुहुन्छ भने जहाँ सप्लायर जो चल्ला उठाउनुहुन्छ उहाँहरूले चाहिँ ल है तेरो चल्ला माथि यति रेट छ, यो भन्दा चाहिँ हामी उठाउन सक्दैन भनेर चाहिँ हामीलाई त्यहाँ चाहिँ मारिरहनु भएको छ कि प्रत्येकचोटि हामी किसान मरिरहेका छौँ कि त्यहाँ।
मुख्य चुनौतीको विषय भनेको सरकारले हेर्ने दृष्टिकोण। आम श्रमजीवी किसानहरू एकातिर काम गरिरहेका छन्, उत्पादन गरिरहेका छन् र बिक्री वितरणको सन्दर्भमा बिचौलियाहरू हावी भइदिएका छन् र असमान मूल्य निर्धारण भइदिँदाखेरि लागत अनुसारको आम्दानी र बचत गर्न सक्ने वातावरण छैन।
उपभोक्ताले चाहिँ 600-700 सम्म हाल्नु भएको छ, 750 सम्म हाल्नु भएको छ। यसलाई भने हाम्रो 500 पाउनु पनि गाह्रो छ। यो भनेको अब बिचमा बिचौलिया प्रवृत्ति भयो। अब किसानले स्वयं लगेर उपभोक्तालाई दिन सम्भव छैन। बिचौलियाहरू हुँदाखेरि उहाँले चाहिँ हामीले पाए जति रेट हामीले आफूले पाउनुपर्ने रेट पाएका छैनौँ र किसानले पनि अब किसानले नपाउँदाखेरि उपभोक्ताले पनि त्यो सहज पाइएको छैन।
लागत मूल्य नै 19 रुपियाँ 56 पैसा भएको कारणले गर्दा अझै हामीले लागत मूल्य पाएको अवस्था छैन। भनेको सन्तुष्टि चल्नलाई सन्तुष्टि छ। यो लागत मूल्य फेरि हाम्रो पहिला हामी विगत 5-6 वर्षदेखि भूकम्प कोरोना हुँदै फल्लिएको व्यवसाय र त्यसको घाटाको पनि ब्याज जोडिनुपर्ने हिसाबले लागत मूल्य अहिलेसम्म पाएको अवस्था छैन।
अहिले सन्तुष्ट त मान्ने अवस्था त्यति छैन, किनभने पहिलेदेखिको लसमा भएको व्यवसायलाई त्यो थोरै छोटो समयमा आएको प्रफिटले चाहिँ त्यति नधाल्न। तैपनि हामी लागत मूल्यको नजिक पुगेका छौँ। अहिलेसम्म फाइदामा चाहिँ पुगिसकेको छैन।
तपाईँको 15 दिन 20 दिनमा रेटहरू चाहिँ अप डाउन भइरहेको हुन्छ। अब दिगो तरिकाले जुन रेटको हुनुपर्ने, जुन मार्केटमा हुनुपर्ने, जुन हामीले पाउनुपर्ने जुन रेट छ त्यो चाहिँ हुँदैन। लगभग 15 दिन 20 दिनमा चाहिँ तलमाथि भइरहेको हुन्छ।
And that wraps up our issue of the day. Moving on to other news, Nepal's Finance Minister, Dr. Swarnimogli, has pledged to remove regulatory hurdles facing the country's information technology sector, saying the government will take a flexible approach on issues including taxation and licensing. Speaking at a meeting with more than 24 technology startups, Mogli said information technology had emerged as an increasingly attractive area for investment and that the government would encourage young entrepreneurs working in the sector.
हाम्रो सोचाइ चाहिँ अब यो टेक फिल्डलाई एकदमै अगाडि बढाउने हो र जसले राम्रो काम गरिराख्नु भएको छ उहाँहरूलाई प्रोत्साहन दिने हो र यो काम गर्दै गर्दाको अप्ठ्याराहरू के छ त्यसलाई फुटाउँदै जाने हो र नयाँ सेक्टरहरूमा पनि पोजिसन गर्नु पर्यो। अमेरिका, चाइनाहरूले, इन्डियाहरूले नै चाहिँ they are figuring out something in this area. Nepal पनि अलिकति जम्प स्टार्ट गरेर त्यो फ्रन्टियरमै हालेर चाहिँ केही कुराहरूमा हामीले अग्रस्थानमा जान सक्छौँ कि भन्ने।
Nepal's Bagmati Province Chief Minister Kiran Thapamagar has won a confidence vote in the Provincial Assembly, securing 57 votes with none against. Deputy Speaker Apsara Chapagai announced the result with lawmakers from Nepali Communist Party, CPN-UML and Rashtriya Prajatantra Party backing the government. The vote exposed divisions within Rashtriya Prajatantra Party or RPP over support for Thapamagar's government. The party's central leadership has taken action against 3 lawmakers who joined the government as ministers and had asked the Provincial Assembly to remove them from their posts. RPP's Bagmati Provincial Committee has rejected that move, urging the Assembly Secretariat not to recognize the dismissal letter. RPP Bagmati Province Committee Chair Bikram Thapa said the action was unilateral and violated the party's statute. Meanwhile, the main opposition Nepali Congress boycotted the assembly session and instructed all its lawmakers not to participate in the confidence vote process. Congress said a legal challenge to Thapamagar's appointment remains pending before the Hetauda bench of the High Court of Patan and argued that the confidence vote should not have proceeded while the case is under consideration. Nepal's 18th NADA Auto Show opened in Kathmandu today, with government and business leaders calling for stronger domestic production and investment in electric vehicle infrastructure. Vice President Ram Sahai Prasad Yadav described the automobile sector as a key pillar of Nepal's economy and urged a shift from fossil fuel vehicles to electric mobility. He called for government and private sector cooperation to expand charging stations and promote local vehicle production. FNCCI President Anjan Shrestha said the automobile sector generated around 81 billion rupees, which is about $531 million in state revenue last year, also pledging or urging policies to encourage domestic vehicle and spare parts assembly. NADA President Surendra Kumar Upreti also called for an international standard exhibition center in Kathmandu, saying the current Bhrikuti Mandap venue lacks space for large vehicles and equipment. The auto show, themed From Industry to Employment, runs until 9th of September. Nepal police have arrested a 27-year-old man accused of manhandling a female police officer who was on duty in Kathmandu's New Baneshwar area. Police identified the suspect as Raj Kathayat, originally from Jumla district and currently living in Kathmandu. According to Kathmandu District Police, the incident happened after the officer asked Kathayat to use an overhead pedestrian bridge to cross the road. Kathmandu District Police Range spokesperson, Superintendent of Police Dan Bahadur Thapa, confirmed the arrest and said an investigation was underway. Now, a continental forum created to enhance the capacity of broadcasters, the Asia Pacific Institute for Broadcasting Development, is nearing its Golden Jubilee celebrations. Nepal, as a full member of the institution, hosted the 24th AIBD General Conference and associated meetings. Minister and Information and Communication Dr. Bikram Timal Sina, in his keynote speech, drew attention of the regional broadcasters towards utilizing a modern advancement in the sector while keeping in mind the susceptibility to artificial intelligence AI. Siksha Bhattarai brings more.
The 24th General Conference of the Asia Pacific Institute for Broadcasting Development AIBD brought together 12 member countries including Bhutan, India, Malaysia, Maldives, Nepal, South Korea, Thailand, Brunei, Papua New Guinea, Cambodia, Mauritius, and Vietnam. The strong participation reflected the region's commitment to cooperation and media development. The conference reviewed AIBD's activities from August 2025 to August 2026, highlighting 44 programs with over 2,300 participants. These covered artificial intelligence, journalism, content creation, climate change, disaster resilience, cybersecurity, information integrity, and leadership. Artificial intelligence was a key focus, with workshops on AI tools, AI-assisted production, digital media, and disinformation. In his keynote address to the summit, Nepal's Minister for Information and Communication, Dr. Bikram Timal Sina, said public interest should be at the center as the sector undergoes transformation amid the rapid development of information technology.
The broadcasting environment is changing rapidly. Artificial intelligence, digital platforms, mobile connectivity, streaming services, and changing audience behavior are transforming the entire media value chain, from content production and distribution to audience engagement. We should not look at the changes only as threats. They also present enormous opportunities.
The Asia Media Summit 2026 echoed these themes, centering on trust, sustainability, digital transformation, and the future of public service media. Climate change and disaster resilience were also emphasized. SAARC Secretary General Muhammad Ghulam Sarwar, in the opening ceremony, said the regional body that has been helping build the capacity of broadcasters should also evolve along with the evolving technology.
Developments and communications are inextricably linked. Information and communication technology and modern broadcasting are not passive observers of social growth. They are the active engines driving it. By providing access to reliable information, education, and digital services, media empowers the citizen to participate in decision making, bridge geographic divides, and build sustainable livelihood.
Chair of AIBD's Executive Board, Sudhiritai Lerkasim, said efforts would be crucial in helping media organizations adapt to emerging technologies while upholding professional standards and public trust.
For among 50 years, AIBD has provided a valuable platform for broadcasters, media organizations, policymakers, and communication professionals across the Asia-Pacific region and beyond. In knowledge exchange, capacity building, and media cooperation.
Through initiatives like Terra Asia and partnerships with UNESCO and WHO, AIBD has supported journalists in reporting on climate, health and road safety, areas where responsible media can save lives. Technical cooperation and knowledge sharing remain central. AIBD continues to collaborate with ITU, UNESCO and regional partners to support digital transformation and emerging technologies. Vice Chair of AIBD's Executive Board, Urvashi Bosniak, expressed her belief that the conference would be instrumental in determining AIBD's strategic priorities and enhancing cooperation in technical and content-related areas.
AIBD provides a valuable platform for broadcasters to share knowledge, develop skill, and learn from one another. We are moved towards the AIBD 50 years. I believe we should make this cooperation even stronger, more practical, and more focused on for future.
AIBD Chief Executive Philomena Nagaprasam said thanking Nepal for hosting the summit made the participants aware of the growing threat of AI in the communication sector.
So AIBD signed a declaration together with Europe on achieving gender balance. And many of you will go for women's lib, or I've never heard of a men's lib yet, but what we go for is gender balance. So that's the way forward. So we try to have a balance of male and female in every workshops, in every conference, in every panels.
Chairperson of Akarab, Arjun Giri, said media sector needs to embrace new platforms while ensuring the responsible and ethical use.
We are meeting at a time when our media landscape is changing very fast. Digital platforms have changed the way people receive and share information. Artificial intelligence is becoming part of our daily life. At the same time, misinformation and disinformation are growing. In this situation, reliable and fact-based media are more important than ever.
On the occasion, AIBD launched its strategic roadmap towards its Golden Jubilee in 2027. The celebrations will culminate at the Asia Media Summit in South Korea, where AIBD will unveil its vision for the future and commemorate 5 decades of regional cooperation and media development.
When a nation moves forward on the soldiers of its youth, it leaves behind silent sacrifices where the cost of standing up for change is paid not in speeches but in silenced lives. Sudeksha Rajak Voice with Anjir Singh Biko brings a report.
And on the streets have long died down. The crowds that demanded accountability and a better tomorrow have dispersed back into daily life. But for one family in Thimi, Bhaktapur, the battle for change never ended. It simply collapsed into a silent bedroom. This is 32-year-old Daulat Thapa, originally from Indravati, Sindhupalchok. On September 9, 2025, driven by a vision to end corruption, Daulat joined the Gen Z uprising. He returned not with victory, but with a traumatic head injury that plunged him into a semi-coma. For over 6 months, Daulat has remained trapped between life and death, his eyes open but without recognition, his body present but his consciousness lost. Before that fateful day, Daulat was the sole financial pillar of his family, earning their daily bread behind the wheel of a truck. Today, that pillar lies shattered. With initial medical expenses crossing 1.2 million Nepali rupees, the family is drowning in debt. As medical science reaches its limits, long-term rehabilitation remains the only option. Recognizing his sacrifice, the Gen Z Foundation has formally urged the government to declare Daulat Thapa a living martyr, demanding permanent state housing, long-term care, and employment support for his destitute family.
पटक पटक कुराहरू आएको छ र उहाँहरूले त्यो माग पनि गर्नु भएको छ त्यो विषयमा विभिन्न ठाउँमा छलफल चाहिँ भएको छ यद्यपि हालसम्म उहाँलाई जिउँदो शहीद घोषणा गर्ने विषयमा चाहिँ कुनै पनि निर्णय भइसकेको चाहिँ छैन.
For the residents of Bhaktapur and fellow activists, Daulat's state is a painful reminder of the human cost of political transformation. Daulat is currently undergoing treatment at Kathmandu Medical College, honoring his sacrifice, providing just compensation, and assuming the moral duty of lifelong care is not just a policy request. It is the state's absolute ethical obligation. A nation's true character is judged not by the slogans carved on its monuments, but by how it honors the living heroes who bled to build its future. Suveksha Rajak with Anjir Singh, BK, NTV World.
International news lined up next. For now, a recap of the top stories this hour. Nepal faces renewed calls for tougher action on rape. Bara juvenile case reignites debate over punishment. Nepal launches quick fix plan for public services. High traffic officers given 30-day deadline for improvements. Nepal's poultry farmers take to streets over mounting losses. Protesters demand action against middlemen and illegal chicken imports. India and China hold fresh talks on border dispute. Two sides discuss peace, stability and bilateral ties. US widens economic sanctions on Iran. New sanctions hit aviation, shipping, gold and technology. And Nepal begins ACC Premier Cup preparations in style. Defeat Malaysia by 9 wickets in warm-up match. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar met Russian President Vladimir Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Moscow, as New Delhi and Moscow discussed bilateral ties, the Ukraine conflict, regional developments and global challenges. In his meet with Putin, Jaishankar briefed him on the latest session of the India-Russia Intergovernmental Commission on Trade, Economic, Scientific, Technological and cultural cooperation. He said economic ties between the two countries had expanded significantly. During talks with Lavrov, Jaishankar reviewed cooperation across a range of areas including trade, technology and other bilateral priorities, as well as regional and multilateral issues. Putin credited Prime Minister Narendra Modi with helping strengthen the India-Russia partnership and said he hoped to meet him soon. The average global sea surface temperature has reached its highest record level, in fact, on record, a European Union agency said, warning that a rapidly intensifying El Nino and human-caused climate change were putting unprecedented strain on the world's oceans. In a statement on Monday, the EU's Copernicus Climate Change Service said sea surface temperatures hit 21.1 degrees Celsius on Friday and Saturday, surpassing the previous record of 21.09 degrees Celsius set in March 2024. Copernicus called the timing of the new record particularly notable. It said global ocean temperatures usually peak in March and April when the summer in the southern hemisphere, which is mostly ocean, draws to a close. But this year the record was set in August. The World Meteorological Organization, too, said it expects El Nino to strengthen in the coming months, and Copernicus said its seasonal forecasting system indicates that the event could reach levels not seen for several decades. Business news lined up next. For now, a short breather.
Vietnam's exports of mobile phones and components reached $42.16 billion by August 15, up more than 18% year-on-year, as demand from Asian markets drive growth in the country's electronics sector. Exports to South Korea jumped 69% to nearly $4 billion in the first 7 months, while shipments to Japan rose 59% to $1.65 billion. China remained Vietnam's largest market at about $8.15 billion, followed by the United States at $7.12 billion. The figures underscore Vietnam's growing role in global electronic supply chains, with multinational manufacturers continuing to dominate the sector.
Time now for a sports update. Around 2,500 athletes from 64 countries took part in the 38th Bosphorus cross-continental swimming race in Istanbul, Turkey, swimming from Asia to Europe across the iconic strait. The 6.5-kilometer race challenged competitors with strong currents and waves as they made the crossing from the Asian shore to the European side. Last year's champions successfully defended their titles. Doğukan Ulaş won the men's race in 52 minutes and 3 seconds, while Su Inal claimed the women's title in 54 minutes and 54 seconds. The annual event has become a major fixture in Istanbul's sporting calendar, offering athletes a rare chance to compete between two continents in a single race. Now to the weather updates, first from Nepal and then around the world. And before wrapping up, here are the top stories of this hour. Nepal faces renewed calls for tougher action on rape. Bara Jivanar case reignites debate over punishment. Nepal launches quick fix plan for public services. High traffic officers given 30-day deadline for improvements. Nepal's poultry farmers take to streets over mounting losses. Protesters demand action against middlemen and illegal chicken imports. India and China hold fresh talks on border disputes. Two sides discuss peace, stability and bilateral ties. U.S. widens economic sanctions on Iran. New sanctions hit aviation, shipping, gold and technology. And Nepal begins ACC Premier Cup preparations in style. Defeat Malaysia by 9 wickets in warm-up match. That's it for this edition of News Hour here on NTV World. Do join us through social media and also visit our official website, nepaltelevision.com. I'm Sarah Sapsanamarai. Thanks for staying with us. Good night.